Oh, we're just starting. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, good evening. Calling to order the special meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission on Monday, January 7th, 2019. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Do roll call.
Give me 1 second.
Moving too fast. All right. Just in time.
Good, yeah.
Good.
Okay. Commissioner Taylor.
Present.
Commissioner Jacobson.
Present.
Vice Chair Ittner.
Here.
Chair Firestone.
Here.
Commissioner Comerford.
Okay, great. Public comments? No? Okay. Okay. We do have Deputy Pulpita from the Police Department for a report. Item 5.
If you
No new,
come right up to the lectern there. Thank you.
yeah, there's no new major incidents to report. Weather's pretty much mitigated. Everything's been averaging 30 degrees at night. Shelters are open, so no transients in the parks, etc. So no new graffiti. So everything's been pretty quiet. Is there any questions?
Easy peasy, huh?
Yeah.
Great.
Fair enough.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds
Giving
good.
us
Thanks,
an
guys. Have a good night.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Grant, we expect to come eventually, so we can skip item 6 for now, the Public Works report. Item 7, approval of minutes from the December 17th, 2018 special meeting.
That's going to be it's pending.
Okay,
Yeah.
we don't have those yet.
We do not have those.
Okay, pending. So then, why don't we get started on our discussion items? Let's see, so 8A, I think we want to wait for Mr. Grant, that's the Sarzati Multi-Sport Courts. The Libby Bowl fee waiver program, 8B, I think we could do.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, why don't we get started on that? So, last time, we brought this up, that we have been asked to review the applications for fee waivers. There were some questions last time about if enough notice had been given to possibly interested parties. Do we have any feedback on what happened with the process? Or?
Well, it was, as far as I know, I mean, Sage has Commissioner Ittner has a good history of that part of it, but from what I understand, there was notice given to the public as to the application process. I believe it was put in the paper. So there was opportunity for folks to meet that October deadline. I think it was, October, as it says on the application, October 20th of 2018. So they had up until that time to get their application in, and as you'll see before you, you have 3 applications.
So James, will you run us through, because you handled that for the city?
Yeah, so I'd be happy to. Apologies for my tardiness, and good evening, commissioners. In a nutshell, that's correct. So the Libby Bowl Ad Hoc Committee over the years has been performing this function of reviewing these Libby Bowl fee waiver applications. And so this year, the Libby Bowl Ad Hoc Committee was making its recommendations to the council and kind of wrapping up. I don't know if it has completely or not, but so one of the things we did was we asked if the Parks and Rec Commission, because this is occurring in the Libby Bowl, if the Parks and Rec Commission would be the appropriate commission to review this. So that's how it got here. And then what we did during that time when we were figuring all that out is we put advertisements on our web page, on our Facebook page, and on, and then we contacted the vendors, or event promoters who have previously put on events with the city So we did those three things. So
Those that had applied before, or just all that had used?
those that have applied before for a
Okay,
fee
so
waiver.
it went to those who had already received one or applied for one?
Mhm.
Okay,
Someone who previously demonstrated the need.
uh-huh.
And so we did that, put it on our webpage, put it on our Facebook page, opening it up to anybody who was interested in applying. And from that, we ended up with these 3 applications, which is a reduction from what we've had in previous years. But we've kind of noticed this, that citywide, we've had fewer events, fee waivers applied for, and all the different commissions that run them. So it seems like this year, I think because of the Thomas Fire hitting right at the end of 2018, end of 2017, early 2018, and some other things, that it seems like we just had fewer applications
Couple
across the
quick
board.
questions. When you refer to the webpage that was posted on, are you talking about the cities or
Yes.
the Libby Bowl page?
City webpage, city Facebook page.
Okay, so it wasn't on there's a webpage for the Libby Bowl,
Mhm.
so it wasn't on there?
I don't
Or
know
in the
for sure.
newspaper?
No, we wouldn't put an ad for something like this in the newspaper.
Okay. I think even, this is my opinion coming off of the Libby. I think we were concerned at the committee level about our reach and how widely we were publicizing it, even before this year. So I still have concerns that we're not putting it as far and as wide as we should. So we're going to the people who applied and somehow figured it out the last year or two, but we may not have reached groups that don't know about it.
Right, but having said that, so last year we only had one person apply outside of this process, which has been an improvement over previous years. It was the Thomas Fire Remembrance event. And they only applied, or they acknowledged when they applied late that they knew about this process. They weren't sure if they were going to have the event at the time of the process.
Right.
And that could happen again this year. There could be hopefully not, but there could be something that happens within the city and somebody wants to do a memorial event or something like that a year from now. That's not going to be caught by this, but we didn't have any, for the first time, we didn't have any applications last year come in outside of the process that should have come in during the process.
And that's great, but I still think that doesn't mean that people know enough about it. It doesn't mean that we're broadly enough communicating. And the fact that we don't have it on the Libby Bowl webpage, which was brought up in our committee, to publicize it is concerning, because that is hopefully where everyone will go for information about the bowl, is the libbybowl.org. So these are just, I think as we, the commission's taking it on, but these are concerns I have about the process, and that were concerns that we had also at the committee level about the process that had come up. So
Yeah.
I hope to push them forward instead of letting them drop as we go from one body to another to take on reviewing these.
Well, and that'll be the nice thing this coming year, because last year was a protracted kind of half and half process, but that is something that's going to be directly within the Parks and Rec Commission's purview this year. So we can make modifications as needed. And just to clarify, I don't know that it was posted on the Libby Bowl webpage. That's just something I don't know off the top of my head. I can check that and send an email to Sophocles with that information. It may have been on there. I'm just not sure.
Bigger picture, I just think if we're going to do this program, we need to reach and make it as publicly, out there in the public as much as possible, because the point is to give waivers to things that will benefit the community. And if we're going to go through the process, I want to make sure that we're reaching as far and wide as we can.
Right.
So we're getting a diverse participation. And from my perspective, I don't think we're there yet. I'm not saying we don't do it this year, because this body hasn't had any part of it. But I think that from my perspective, being on that committee and getting to here, I don't think we've done our best work.
I'm sure we could get more people.
I'm not at all confident in the fact that our reach is as wide as it should have been. That being said, even if we do this, I hope that we'll, that if something comes up that's really important and is a great benefit to the community, we're not locking it down to say this is it.
I think we showed that last year. We pulled the Thomas Fire event the week before the event to get them.
I just want to acknowledge that here and now, that as I do this
Yeah.
process, as a commissioner and as a past member of that committee, I'm not fully confident that we've made the reach that we need to have reached all of the groups that we would like to, nor has it gotten the time it might need to get that done. So that as we move forward, we might acknowledge that we're still working this out, and these transitions and timing is all a little off, and that we just take that into account and not just assume that We have this tendency to use numbers where, well, we had this many this year, we had this many this year, we only had this person come this year, and have some confidence that we know things. I'm not clear that we know that much yet about this process in its third year, and I just don't want to make a lot of conclusions based on what we know, and I want to be open to that may need to change. And this may not represent the best form of it.
Right. Any other questions? I'll be here, so if you come up with any. But in short, so we received the 3 applications which were provided to you. There was no budgetary amount set this year for, we didn't pre-approve a certain dollar amount this year. So whatever recommendation you bring, we'd expect to bring to the city council for approval, just like we always do.
So there is not a set amount at this time?
No.
Okay.
And this will probably come up once we get involved in the particulars of each application, but I noticed there isn't any requests for liability insurance, so you guys who have both been on the committee,
We will.
is that something we are
Yes.
going to ask for or need to ask for?
Yeah, we get that as
going
part of
forward?
their actual user application process. And so they included their application with their packets, but we do treat them like 2 separate things. We have the fee waivers, and then once that gets approved, then we go
And
through
we-
the application process and make sure we have insurance documents. and all that.
Okay, yeah,
That's really
yeah, I just didn't notice it on the actual application, like when it said, what are the required documents? I don't know, I didn't notice that.
Oh, that's a good point.
But-
It could be added to the requirements in the future.
Yeah, I'm a Johnny come lately in the process too, so
Are-
just throwing it out there that.
Are you pretty familiar with all these
Um,
applications?
it's been a couple months since I read them, but I think I can answer some questions if you have them.
Okay.
I don't have a copy of the actual fee waiver for the Ojai Film Festival. I only have.
I don't
their-
either.
Yeah,
I
that
only have their
wasn't,
user application and agreement.
the one for the film festival wasn't in our packet.
It wasn't even in what I emailed to you
There was a
either.
file with that name, but it was a copy of the.
It was the Independence Festival twice. Yeah, I just noticed it.
Oh, it
so would've said
was.
something.
So you should have the hard copy then now
Right.
of it. Sorry about the not
No.
emailing that correctly. No?
I don't think so.
I only
Film
have the,
festival. You don't
it
have,
says at the top, user application and agreement, whereas the other ones specifically say City of Ojai Libby Bowl fee waiver application.
you know, I'm, again, coming into it late as I have. I think these are the same thing.
Yeah,
The
the information looks.
and
the
I
same.
noticed they're different too.
What are the same
Um,
thing?
Uh,
Oh, yeah, we're just missing the one piece.
The text of this for
Mhm.
the film one,
Right.
I think is the same or similar to
oh, I see. It's saying,
actual.
let me
application here.
Let me get on board with you here, 'cause they're pretty,
Oh,
so there's the Libby Bowl user application and agreement, and then there's the Libby Bowl fee waiver application. Is that what you're
Yeah.
referring to?
And the fee waiver application has on question 6, how much they're requesting be waived. It breaks down, because not all tickets are eligible for a waiver.
Um,
So it breaks down some really important information for us to consider.
Mhm.
And along those lines, I noticed that the one that I think is probably most clear is the Ojai Independent Committee. It
Yeah.
has a specific dollar amount, but performances to grow on is a little bit more confusing because not all their tickets qualify. And
Right.
it doesn't have a hard amount, and I did have a conversation with him about his desire and what dollar amount, and he was uncertain, said the numbers were unclear. And I actually asked him to come and join us tonight.
well, maybe.
But it's not clear, like, and I don't know what our rule is or what our past practice has been. I kind of feel like it should be more of a, kind of a definitive number, so we know what our dollar amount is going forward.
And last year, they did not get the full award that they had requested. They got the award based on the number of performances they were doing for kids
Right.
to cover the.
Right. And the
And-
Friday is, they are now doing children and an adult performance and asking for a fee waiver on the adult, correct? Is that how you read it?
Yes.
Well, getting
Oh,
back
right.
to the film festival, that's all I had.
Right.
This is,
Which is-
what I gave you is,
Oh,
You don't have the other portion.
no,
maybe,
what I gave you is what I had. And I guess I'm just,
are they maybe not applying for a fee waiver?
no, they are.
Yeah, maybe what we can do is we can get all the documentation and email it out and just start the conversation today.
That's-
Because
sounds like
I don't think you can make that decision without that information.
And I think if we're gonna ask the Ojai Film Festival for the application, I think it would be helpful for staff to then reach out to Performances to Grow On and ask them for a little bit clearer breakdown of what they're asking for.
Right.
Because it's
Yeah.
very confusing trying to read through. Even after my conversation with him, I was still confused.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
I mean,
Yeah,
a dollar, a bottom line, even if it's a minimum amount and a maximum amount, it would,
Right, so
describe.
with the performances to grow, for one thing, it's a multi-day event. So they're asking for a fee, all of the facility fees to be waived,
for both days.
which is, it's a 4-day event.
Yeah.
So in their application, it just says waive the facility fees. So that's one request. And then also to waive that $3 per ticket facility fee. It doesn't say specifically for the children's events, I don't think, in their application. So
So we need clarification.
I think some
Yeah.
clarity on kind of, if we're
I think it's
thinking,
only are you, I know they have 24 to 27, but one is a setup day and one is a breakdown day. I was under the impression it was just the storytelling for the children that one day and then the adult event the next day. Do we count the setup and the takedown as the strike day and the setup day as a
They're something you pay for.
Yeah,
user
They
fee?
have
Just
fees are
user
imposed upon
fees.
those. It might be helpful to, in what goes out, is to have last year's applications and
Mhm.
last year's awards, just for everyone's sake to see a picture of what we've done, and the year before. Would that be helpful, I think, to look at what was awarded and what was presented those times? Last year, we had a meeting where we had any of the people who were applying come in and present. And we could give them that opportunity if they want to. We could have a special meeting if we need to, at a time that might work. And then hear what they have to say and ask them questions.
yeah, we just did that with the Arts Commission, and it was very helpful because all of these questions they're able to
You can't
answer on the
answer them.
spot. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So perhaps, we can either call a special meeting or schedule the next meeting and provide that information in the meantime and coordinate with them.
I think it's also hard, not knowing kind of what the budget for,
Well, we didn't have budgets the years before either. We just made recommendations.
right.
And that can be, and then we can see if it doesn't work, they'll come back to us. But if our recommendations work,
Thought I read in the city policy, they set a limit on that, wasn't it?
well, we got that last month, but I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, I thought
We
that
were
was
told
a
last
new-
month that there was an amount not to exceed.
So
But that
last,
would be the first time that we had heard of that, and I don't know,
Yeah.
that has not been what has happened the previous 2 years.
last year, what happened was the budget, as part of the budget process, the budget team set a $5,000 kind of placeholder.
Okay, maximum.
So that was kind of what we were hoping we would end up at around. So I would say this year, looking at the 3, I didn't think that they would even get to that amount. So I think, it's fair to say that it's kind of all, or that it's a reasonable amount. It's just going to be whether you find that it meets the criteria and adds value.
Maybe we should, can we have a copy of that at our next meeting when we talk,
You mean the page of the budget?
no, the policy that he's referring to? There's an actual policy on it.
Well, there's a budget line item, and there is also the policy that we got last time that's setting up how we go through the process.
The criteria. Do we have that, Tom?
I have I have 2 copies that is somewhere in this pile of papers. I can
But you can send that out
pass it
too.
on to you. Oh,
Yeah.
this is what you're probably referring to.
Just a refresher.
I got 2 copies of what you,
I just need a little refresher.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Papers.
Well, I just have to say, going back to the budget, though, I think it's really important, regardless whether we had one in the past or not.
Yeah.
I mean, going forward, we should have a budget. You just can't work without a budget,
Yeah,
you know? So that should be a real strong point for us.
yeah.
Then there should be a
Interesting.
discussion of the budget.
Sure.
Yeah, because that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, but I mean, it's important. It's very important,
So,
so.
yeah, I mean, it seems like at this point, like you suggested, we can say if this seems like an appropriate
Mm.
use of a fee waiver
Right.
or not. And we can't
Yeah.
really weigh kind of who
Yeah,
and how
who
much
can
to
have it.
because we
Yeah.
don't know what the
Right.
budget is. And maybe that's
Exactly.
fine. Maybe that's all the council needs.
I think it works okay this year because there's not a ton of applications, but in the future it may be problematic. So
Yeah, I mean,
one
it's-
thing this year, maybe if the commission feels there's an appropriate amount that they'd like to request when we do the budget in April and May, might work, to make that request at that time. We can always make the recommendation, but it would be interesting to hear what the commission actually thinks would be a good amount for that.
Mhm.
So,
So I'm hearing
Okay, so yeah,
previous 2 years, applications and awards.
mhm.
previous 2.
Because we've done it for 2 years previous to this year. The rest of the application for the Ojai Film Festival. And then trying to set up either at our next meeting to have the applicants come in to answer questions. And then send the policy back out to everybody so that they'll have that at the same time while they're looking to review these. And then we'll have time to make notes and have questions before that meeting.
That's good. Thank you for taking this on. I know it's a big job, but I think it's something that could be fun for the Parks and Rec Commission.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So while we're still on the topic, are there any other kind of follow-up questions based on the application material that we have seen? We're going to try to get the applicants to show up at our next meeting, so we should be prepared at that point. And if there's anything we want them to bring to the meeting, it'd be good to know that.
I was just gonna ask, is there a number that we should kind of gear towards, the number of applicants? I mean, you say we don't have that many, but is there a particular number that would work? And,
I think because we only have 3,
yeah,
it can be all or some or none. It really is up to the commission.
okay.
If we had 20, I'd be asking you to try to whittle it down a little
Okay.
bit. But with 3, it's just at the commission's discretion.
Okay,
And I think that's back to mission too. What's the point of this process?
Right.
What are we trying to do? What are we trying to create? Why are we doing this? And I think that is not a monetary issue, but create value, provide, various forms of entertainment and opportunities for the community that might not otherwise happen without the fee waivers.
Do you recall just offhand what the number was last year of applicants? Was it 6 or
I
7?
thought it was 6.
6, I believe,
Yeah.
and then one outside the process, which was
Right.
the
The
Thomas Fire.
Thomas Fire.
And I think we talked last time, the 3 people that didn't apply weren't having events, correct?
Right.
And in the spirit of it too, it's not just to create the same ones over and over, but to bring and create and allow opportunity for things to evolve in the community that we don't know that we want or have yet, but that there's space and support to provide those things for community members, so.
And probably going forward, since this body is going to oversee that, the advertising on the Libby Bowl
Right.
website, and those are the things you talked about.
Make
could
people
do.
aware of it, yeah.
Okay. Anything else on this topic? Thanks, Mr. Vega.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
So why don't we move back to item 8A?
Do you
Got-
want, oh,
Do you wanna do
sorry,
6?
sorry, Chair.
Go back to 6?
Firestone, do you want to even go all the way further back?
All right, well, we have Mr. Grant here.
Yeah.
So he's here for item 6 and 8A, so we'll go back to 6.
Public Works, okay.
Public Works report.
Do we go back to the Public Works report?
Yeah.
for Libby Park. You know, I was discussing at one of the previous meetings I was here that we had a architect do a rendering, so I'm going to pass those out to everybody.
Oh, good.
And see if I'll keep a few this way. One for you and Councilman Ward. So these were, you know, we reviewed these concepts previously, but they were just schematic, a plan view. So this rendering, I think, makes it a little bit more common sense, visual to most people. And
Nice. It's a good one.
so we're still waiting on the cost estimates from them.
Yep.
But just as a reminder, the first one,
Wow.
perspective A, is pretty much what we have, you know, so it'd be a new coat of paint and the roof needs some work, but the interior would be remodeled, as well as this rendering had a new fountain tile backdrop, you know, to kind of spruce it up a little bit. So this is probably our more likely approach, right, is that with limited budgets and presuming that we would receive some sort of a kind donation or from Ojai Civic Association, that we might be able to do a nice remodel on this restroom. So that was the basic one, option 1. Option 2A is a reminder, that's that plan view that had an entry with separated male and female sides of the restroom with a small janitor closet. And that one, still on the top of that, those are the outdoor fountains. So you can see that in the rendering down below. But this provided more privacy than there was a concept that had everything combined, right? All of the male and female mixed toilets next to each other. And so this would allow, for instance, whatever the men or women's side to, there's still outdoor sinks, right, with mirrors outside, but there's mirrors inside of these restrooms as well. So there's a little more privacy.
Were you
But-
still on 2A as you're describing?
Yes.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And now if you flip to the next page, page 3, 2B, that was the new, it's really the same as the previous, but just spruced up covering for the outdoor hand washing facilities. So it does help a lot anyways to see this concept. Obviously,
Oh, it
these
does.
facades are easily modified into different approaches, but we've had this Spanish style on quite a bit of the facilities around the city, so it would match the downtown area. So anyways, that was the outdoor covered. Now if you go to the next one, the option 3, that's where we looked at one time having, you walked inside to a covered area, and this seemed like a nice area approach. And this, you see a lot of cities and districts going to this kind of facility, the one that provides all these doors. The advantage is it's easy to lock off the majority of these doors the majority of the time, right? You would only open them up as needed for special events. And so this approach had a common, obviously the common, you see the center hand washing facilities areas. And there probably could still be an option here. There's no privacy as far as if anybody wants to comb their hair or whatever the heck they might want to do in the restrooms, right? But it's a little less privacy than the other rooms provide. But it is a nice approach that a lot of people are going to.
So there's 2 hand washing stations in the middle, is that what that is?
Right, but they're kind of these circular ones that you get a lot of access to.
Okay.
You know, at least 4, if not 6 or more. And so this is a neat approach. Obviously, these approaches get significantly more expensive as you go through them, and it counts on a significant donation or future allocation of the budget from the city.
So this, the non-gender specific, is the most expensive option?
You know, since I didn't get the final estimates, I can't say for sure,
Okay.
but I think it's going to be similar.
Similar,
I
okay.
think 2A and 2B goes up a step, right? Because you've got that outdoor covering, but it's, you know, somewhat minimal. And then, yeah, so option 2 to 3 will be relatively similar.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They,
But these are-
options 2 and 3 both involve tearing down the existing structure and building
Right.
new ones.
Totally new footprint.
At that point, it's probably pretty similar.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
But option 3 actually still has, those are 4 urinals on the one side. They're not all fully functional toilets, correct?
Right.
So they are gender.
Yeah, I think every one of these options has the same number of urinals and toilets provided. It's just when you separate it by men and women's side, obviously, that can restrict the, the amount of facilities, the amount of toilets that are available. So this other approach, labeled as the urinals, I guess you might say, cycle through people pretty quickly sometimes, you know. And then the toilets provides the 13 toilets for everyone's use, right?
Is it typical to put urinals in this
Uh,
gender-neutral bathroom situation?
You know, I haven't seen it that approach that much, but I haven't seen that many of these facilities either. I know it was recommended by the architect, because I think it does cycle people through quicker.
Seems like that's also a detail kind of further down the
Yeah, yeah,
road.
that-
Right.
fair enough.
Within this.
Right, you could go for 18 toilets instead.
Yeah.
And I guess,
See people
without
going
getting too
in there.
detailed
And
into
it
it.
seems like, oh, this isn't a restroom, it's a urinal, and then it really isn't very time-saving, especially if we're dealing
Right.
with kids and, you know,
Yes.
getting in, closing the door, going out.
Agreed, though, Commissioner Firestone, or Chair Firestone, that we would have a lot of options when that came to that time, because
Yeah.
it seemed like, I think one of the things is, for instance, urinals are, waterless is very common now, so it'd be a water-saving feature, possibly.
Mhm.
But, yeah, as I think about it,
Take up the
does it
same
really
amount of
cycle
space.
people through any quicker? Maybe not, it's still a toilet, right? So anyway,
So we're still going into a room, shutting the door, I mean, I don't really think it's that much of a
Yeah.
time saver.
right,
And it
could
takes away from
be a
the
water
available
saver.
usage, I think, overall of the building. But-
right, yeah. But it does provide a significant water savings, I guess, that'd be one benefit. And I would maybe say also, a fairly decent maintenance savings as well. You know, the toilets tend to get damaged and clogged up more commonly than urinals.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
So you're just waiting on costs?
Yes, we're waiting on cost, and we planted, I wanted to go ahead and circulate this to the Ojai Civic Association,
That's
see if
great.
they can help
It's
out.
really done
Very
well.
helpful. Yeah.
It's really done well.
Thank you.
I
And-
just have one comment, though. Separating the men from the women is really a good idea there, because a lot of the women that, and men, I'm sure, but I witnessed women that are performing in various groups, whether it's, youth opera, or whether it's, a play or whatever, a musical play, they use the restroom to put on their costumes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very, very, very evident that, that they needed it. So I'm just thinking that, it probably would be a good idea, depending on the cost, of course, to have them separate.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I guess if they're at the bowl, they potentially have the rooms backstage to
But
do
they're
that kind of thing.
always, so crowded.
Right,
If you've ever been back there during a performance like I have, they're very, very crowded,
right.
yeah. So,
That's a good point, yeah.
Couple things. So one, the options 2 and 3, would those alleviate the need for portable toilets for special events?
That's the intention here. I mean,
that'd be great.
we would have restrooms that would support the Libby Bowl, as well as bigger events, from Ojai Day to other events.
And part of this, you're
And-
doing the sewer, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The sewer upgrade as well. It's, exactly, we're holding off on doing the sewer upgrade until we define this.
Yeah.
And is the priority to do kind of option 2 or 3, but depending on funding, maybe option 1, if that's where funding is that?
Right, I mean, if we receive a significant donation offer, then it might make 2 or 3 an option.
Okay.
Or if
Otherwise, option 1.
at this point, there's been no push or funds dedicated for that kind of thing, so it's a significant upgrade money-wise.
Okay.
Be
So-
interested to see that cost us, but I think they'll see over $1 million for option 2 and 3, whereas we can pull off option 1 for a couple $100,000 roughly.
Oh,
You said $1 million for 2 and 3?
That's my, off the cuff, I'm gonna go, it's up in that
Roughly,
direction.
roughly.
A quarter million, number 1, a complete tear down and rebuild for these facilities, they often run to $300-400 per square foot.
And does that include the cost of the sewer upgrade, or that's just the
That-
building cost?
That's separate.
That's a
the
separate
sewer.
project,
Mhm.
which okay, so that will happen. That cost we'll incur that cost whichever project we do.
Right.
Well, from the perspective of the park and it being usable, I mean, we definitely need more restrooms. Just upgrading what we have doesn't serve the bowl or the use of the bowl or the intended use of the bowl as we're stating it now. So I mean, I understand the funding part comes in and that has to be decided, but for me, it seems obvious that we need 2 or 3. If we decide to scale back for cost purposes to 1, it's great that we've refurbished it and that it'll be nicer, but it is not alleviating an existing problem. And it wouldn't make sense to even, when once you fix the plumbing issue, then that seems like a feasible thing to do. Or, I don't understand the sewage portion of it, but something's not working right. And once you fix that and we have the capacity, it would just be a shame to put in a building that doesn't support the needs of the park right now as we're using it. Just as a pitch, just as the bigger picture here, I understand the financial part and the decisions will be made. But as it is now, that is not large enough to serve the facility that we're pitching to people, so.
With option 1, is that the existing number of toilets? Is that kind of a no net change in number of toilets?
Let's see, number,
Yes.
I believe it's the same. Not
Haven't been on the
100%
men's
sure.
side,
I was
but
gonna say,
But,
I
I
can
mean,
only
it
speak
looks-
to what's on the women's side.
Uh,
That's correct.
Yeah, I believe so,
Check
right.
it out.
Okay, so I just wanted to
Yeah.
recap and show where the status of that was, and we're gonna get it out to the
it'll
Ojai
be
Civic
exciting to
Association.
hear what you hear back after you get it out to them.
Thank you,
Okay.
these are really nice.
Mhm.
Is there any
Yeah.
kind of a time frame?
I would expect
Able
that
to-
we'll get this out within a month and
Oh.
get it back within a month or 2 from Ojai Civic. So I think
Oh,
we'll hear
that's
back in
good.
2 or 3 months.
That's
right?
good.
Councilmember Wyrick, please, come on up.
Yeah, great elevations, thanks. So I just want to make the point, as one of the people deciding about how much to spend things, is sometimes the lowest cost on the front end is not the most cost-effective in the long run. And in that respect, I had some comments about 3, which I've never seen before, which I find very attractive for a couple of reasons that you've already mentioned. One is you don't have to have everything open all the time.
Right.
So therefore, you're not going to have as much of a maintenance and repair cost in the long run. I think that's important because you need to look at life cycle costs. Number 2, I think fountains out in the cover outside as opposed to, I'm thinking you even maybe have gates on a 3 that you could lock up at night.
Oh, like separate down.
And with 3, you're able to protect the washing basins and fountains if you have them, again, reducing your life cycle costs. Because you don't want to have, and also discourages people from sleeping in there.
Yeah.
And that's an important life cycle issue also. So I just wanted to get my 2 bits in, that I'd never seen a concept like 3 before, but I can see you have the extra capacity while still being able to reduce your life cycle costs against vandalism. And because one of my pet peeves right now is that during the Libby Bowl Sterling concerts, the restrooms have become appallingly bad for a number of reasons. And it seems to me like 3 might cost more, but it might give us a better value in the long run for some of those reasons of being able to control access, open up on a low demand basis. And also if somebody trashes one of those stalls, you can separate it from everything else while you fix it.
Right.
So it doesn't become such an eyesore for the whole place. So, and again, I'm just sitting here and I just had some thoughts I wanted to share.
Gives you the most flexibility.
Yeah, this one.
I should mention, in option 2, we're looking into, but we haven't gone that far with it, but trying to lock off these stalls appears to be somewhat of an option, but it's
Not as
obviously
easy.
much easier to vandalize.
And then you
those
have the
doors and things,
outside
yeah.
fountain, the outside fixtures, which,
Yeah,
to me, if you have an outside fixture like that exposed to the weather and whoever is around all night, they're just not going to stay nice very long.
right.
It's just
I think it's even if you were able to lock off these stall doors, and even they're fairly vandal resistant, but not somebody kicking a door or
Right.
anything like that. That can break the lock pretty easily.
I like the idea of the gates, and I also think that the
Yeah,
gates
I
could
would
add a
say
really
suggest gates
lovely
on 3.
aesthetic
Yeah.
element to it if you're done.
So,
Yeah.
just sharing some thoughts sitting here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
suggestions. Very.
Did you want to make a donation towards it?
It does seem like option 1, doesn't get us much.
No, no,
It's a remodel
Right.
no,
purely, right? No extra
no.
Yeah. It's the one that a lot of times remodels work pretty good for budgets, but yeah, it's not really meeting the long-term need, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Other comments, questions?
I think it looks great.
Me
I look forward
too.
to hearing what
Me too.
what we come back with,
Mhm.
what their
Yeah.
reactions are.
Okay, thanks.
And I do like the idea of being able to lock it up. I think it's a really important thing. Yeah, because you're sinking all that money into something that is really nice, and, it just has to be preserved. And the only way to preserve that is to be able to lock it up at night.
I should mention option 2 does allow you to lock off the restrooms, but not the sinks.
Not in the,
And we have, you might have noticed out at Libby Park, we had, I'm not sure if you would have noticed, but those sinks next to the new donate facility from Rock Tree Sky, that new bottle filling station is in.
yeah.
And those outdoor sinks were vandalized pretty heavily a couple months ago or so.
Oh,
And they're super stout. I mean, they're stainless steel, heavy duty, bolted to the concrete masonry, and somehow people managed to beat the heck out of it and bend them
Yeah.
around and things. So yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
And there's been a fair share of interior vandalism all the time at all these restrooms. Really, skate
Yep.
park the worst, Libby maybe second. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else on the restrooms?
Yeah, it's great.
I had while we're on the Public Works report, I had a question. I think I'd emailed you a while ago about this, but somebody came up to me and asked about funding an element in the Sarzati Park master plan, like a minor element that wasn't on our radar. I was just wondering kind of what kind of process, if a citizen says, hey, I'd like to fund something, what process should they go through?
I think generally any donation, staff would take it to council for an acceptance. If they're very minor ones, sometimes they're done within staff, but generally anything of any significance, it goes to council. For instance, the Rock Tree Sky, they just recently donated that water filling station in Libby, so that was a consent item that went to council for approval.
And if they don't know how much something would cost, would they contact the city?
Exactly. With Rock Tree Sky, they called, and I discussed it with them, and we talked about making sure it was a real durable municipal type drinking fountain. That's something that they initially thought about. So it was considerably more expensive, but they took it on anyways. It would end up being, I would estimate, several $1,000s really. Between the drinking fountain, their goal was to have filtered water as well. So there's a filtered water area inside the hallway in the janitorial closet in the back there that you wouldn't see, but it's all filtered water. So anyways, that was several thousand.
Okay.
So it'd take the same thing. That'd be glad to talk to them about any
Sounds good.
donation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. So then, anything else on Public Works? Item 8A then, Sarzati Multi-Sport Courts. So we had given our recommendation to council, which was to build the two courts, and we identified the orientation and whatnot. And the message that we've gotten back is that there is budget for one court. And I think encouragement also on the city staff side for us to approve of moving forward with one court while there's money for it, before there's not money for it.
Good idea.
So we've got Mr. Grant here to talk about that with.
Okay, in rough terms, I guess we had gone through an east-west layout versus the north-south. By chance, I was just goofing around playing tennis with my family in the holidays a little bit out here in Libby. And I emphasize goofing around. I'm no pro tennis player, but and it was interesting because in the wintertime, that low winter sun. I mean, it was very close to the lowest day, around the 21st or so. And playing on the north side of the courts looking south, it was difficult. You really had to have a tight hat on, and you had to be careful how you played. But so that was interesting because that side just had a hard time. If you lobbed it in the air, it was difficult to return it and see the ball. But I think Sophocles and I have reviewed some of these tennis and other court guidelines. And in general, it's always recommended to place north-south, that you've got your issue possibly with the further north you go, the more that sets, and it's difficult to see in the winter sun. But just to emphasize that that's a goal of courts, is to go east-west. So I just wanted to make sure we consider that as well. I think you've already discussed it in other meetings I wasn't here at. And but at the same time, I think we saw like pro football courts, pro football fields, roughly, I think it was 70 to 80% are north-south, but not all. And part of that had to do with the stadiums to help blocking in different situations they have. So just a reminder on potential issues with that. You'll tend to have most players in the morning or evening, not the heat of the day. So that's going to always be that looking at the setting sun or looking at the rising sun. So we might be, the orientation of the courts, while they minimize the impact of that outfield, I know is one of the goals. It may not be ideal. So I just want to remind that, because we had not done a reoriented approach. I think the cost will be very similar, right? It's the same amount of concrete and facilities, the ancillary facilities for these. So, and that beyond, I think either one had the same issue, right? We had, doing planning for 2 courts, and we had an option of doing a single court in the center. And then in the future, if we added the second court, we'd have to add 2 half courts on each side, which is a reasonable, although it has certainly some concerns with the joint line and resurfacing, mostly repainting the surface for the new lines for the new courts. But so that centered one, I guess, helps if you want the north-south, right? We talked about that would provide the extra room you wanted for the outfield, the right outfield from field A. And but if you go to the east-west orientation, I know it has more of an impact on that area. So it really goes back to single court. I think we have the budget. We can move ahead as planned. And that was the intention, I think, is directed by the council when they adopted the capital improvement program, that we would have the money budgeted and proceed with it.
Has that gone back to council, or is this feedback from staff?
Yeah, it has not gone back to council.
So council hasn't weighed in. This is
On
feedback
the-
from staff on the budget that was assigned.
Right. I mean, and I'm not sure if I had any idea of going back to council. You're saying to go back and request to double the budget?
Well, I think what we said is the ideal project from our perspective was the 2 courts to meet our needs for staffing and all of that. And so what really I feels like has happened is we sent it out. I thought we were sending it to council. And it's been bounced back by staff. Because we're clear that the budget's not all there, but what we're saying is that it's really, to meet the needs right now for programming, 2 courts. Because you want one that people can just be using and drop in, and we want one that we can program. And we don't have an outdoor court. So, my understanding is when we send it out is that we know that it's more than what the budget is, but that this is what would best serve the park and the programming and the recreation department. So I just wanted clarification of, has council weighed in on this, or is this just staff reacting to what we wanted to send to council?
I would say that council approved a capital improvement program for 1 court. So for council to go back and say, I think practically any program would say they'd like to see, more improvements and so on. So to go back, I guess it's an option. Softcleans could go back to
the
council and
master-
ask, would you,
Well,
I
the
don't think
master
there's money
plan-
readily available,
The
but
master
yeah.
plan does call
The
out 2
master
courts.
plan calls for 2 courts. So the question is, how long?
No, the question
I-
is,
well,
from my
I just
perspective
wanna-
as a commissioner, what I'm saying is, I would like to present this to council, because I feel like sometimes we make these recommendations and they don't make it all the way there. It's fine if council says this is not feasible, but I'd like to hear that from council and not from staff. That's just to be as clear as I can be. I want council to know that this is why we want it, the reasons behind the intent, and not that it's just that we're reaching for more. That really, to serve the programmatic needs that we have at the recreation department, because we don't have enough court space to run our basketball program, that we need more capacity. This adds the capacity we need. Doing 1 court ends up with, we can't have drop-in and programming. So we're kind of butting heads with the whole point of what we're trying to do, which is to have a good outdoor court for anyone to use during the day, hopefully someday at night, in my dream. But this would serve us so that we can serve our programs as well as just the general public. So so from my perspective, I understand everything you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing with any of it, but I guess that I think it's a higher level question. And I understand that there's money comes into play, but before we shut it down based on money, let's have the bigger discussion of not building something. It's back to the bathroom thing. We could do it one way, but it wouldn't long-term serve us. We could build the 1 court, which would be nice, but then when we want to build another one, it'll be more than double the price, because you start off again with all the same costs you have of construction. So
And
Would it-
orientation-wise, it doesn't really work to do it twice.
It doesn't.
It doesn't work out. I have to agree. I think that my understanding of our objective is to make recommendations to council. If we're not able to get past staff, I don't know that we're fulfilling our obligations to the council. I think that they rely on us as a body to sift through all this and make an educated recommendation. And I think that recommendation should go to council as it comes from this body.
I just have a simple question. Would we lose the budget money that is awarded to the one court? You know, if we
No, I don't think so.
prolong the,
I think it's in the capital improvement program planning and funding,
Okay.
and that has its own fund, it just stays within there. This isn't
Okay.
a grant that expires or anything like that.
oh, good.
Mhm.
Just, I think part of it, to bring this back to this body, is to see, just to make it clear about the longer term weight on that project.
Yeah.
You know, and also to bring back the orientation issue. I hesitate to bring back the orientation issue because the plan calls for east-west, you know, as.
We've had a
as
thorough
just
discussion on
We
this.
had a thorough discussion
We
on
have
it.
hashed this
And
out,
that-
and we
We
felt
did.
comfortable with
And
where we
that-
We
ended.
did.
Now,
But we
that's
just
where I was
wanted to.
confused, is
Yeah.
because the last time that we discussed it, we had two courts oriented east and west.
Yep.
Correct? But
Yep.
maybe I misunderstood. You were
No.
saying north
I
and
guess
south.
I wasn't part of that discussion, so I
Okay.
wasn't.
No,
yeah.
yeah, Mr.
Okay,
Grant
but
was not
tonight,
here then.
when you were referring to it north and south.
Yeah, and I guess you
versus-
discussed the east-west,
Oh,
but there's
yes.
no plan for
Great.
it, right?
Great.
Oh, right.
Detail.
Pretty extensively.
We put
I-
up poles, we've walked the
I thought it
spike.
was.
Yeah, we
like-
did put, yeah.
Oh,
And-
audit the site as well.
Yeah,
okay. Mhm.
we did do quite a bit of legwork on what
That's how we
north,
finally discussed it.
north-south the kind of impacts north-south would have, even though that's the recommended orientation, it doesn't work well for our part. And that was the bottom line.
North-south doesn't work well.
The north part,
Correct,
north,
okay.
south does not. The original, what it had
Worked better.
asked for in the master plan, which was the two courts, east-west, is what we agreed would be the best orientation.
That was our recommendation.
Overall, that was your recommendation. And then, and we did say, and your recommendation too, at the last time we talked about the multi-use sport courts, was to build two. I understand that. We just, I don't know if the words reconsider, but.
We didn't reconsider.
No, no, I know
To be
you
fair.
didn't. I know, no, and I'm not saying that you did. What I'm saying is, we're just bringing it to you one more time to say, hey, if this is what you want, it will take some time longer.
To
That's
be
all.
fair, I understand, but to be fair, at this point, I think it's reasonable as a commissioner to be frustrated.
So let me understand too.
We
So are you
haven't, we
suggesting
haven't
that,
stopped any process as far as.
But it hasn't moved
You know what I
forward.
mean?
No.
Yeah, but,
I
we're
think
not.
Mr.
it-
Grant,
okay.
I think wanted to
Yeah.
say something.
just to help me understand then, so you're suggesting it goes back to the council and request that the project be revised to two courts at one time, and the funding either be provided now through reserves or otherwise, and, or be held until funding is available.
So I think that last part of the statement is what we need to discuss, is what is
That's
the
fine.
or, okay?
Mhm.
So our recommendation to council is proceed with two courts. That's our recommendation. Then the question is, well, what if there's not, we can't arrange funding for two courts?
Right.
Is it put this on hold, or is it build one?
Because I think that would be considered inadequate for staff to approach them and say, the part PRC is requesting that we go to two courts, which I don't think was a question asked by council, so we might get a little heat for that as well.
Well,
but
it is in
also-
the master plan for two courts.
Yes.
Sure, but I mean, there's also a giant facility for millions of dollars, right?
But that's
So-
not on the budget yet, and we haven't requested that, nor has it been delved into by this group. We know that that's not there right now. This is what we had on the CIP. This is what we were moving forward as our own priorities from this body. Again, we can go to them with a recommendation, and then what we get from council is feedback, directly from council.
Or questions that we can further justify with our research and our opinions of
I mean,
usage.
We're just looking, we can support, we can give more information if the council needs it, but council needs to ask the questions they want answered. and they need to give us the feedback on budgetary stuff. I'm not looking, I understand staff and what staff's got going on, but this is a recommendation directly from this commission, boom, right to council.
And the recommendation
make-
is what?
you can
Can you
make it.
clarify what it is?
2 courts,
Two courts.
as
east
laid
and
All right.
out in the master plan.
So your recommendation is to not construct 1 court, but to construct 2 courts when funding is available.
No,
We
not
didn't
that
say when
last
funding
part.
is available. That is up to
That's what-
council.
that's what's
Council
going
weighs in on the funding. We're not in charge of the funding.
I think
We're
we
telling you
also
what the
asked for
plan
some
is.
specific underground conduits to be
Yeah.
in place when funding would, I think the when funding would be available.
For
Part
lighting.
of our recommendation was in regards to lighting.
Yes. As part of the project, that was in our
When
recommendation.
everything is exposed, let's have the conduit in place so that at some point, when funding is available, or even then, I think we asked for it,
Yeah.
but we understood that that wasn't likely to be approved, but at least have the infrastructure in place so that we can add some lighting at some point to have it available during the hours of darkness.
So I think there's a confusion here from my perspective as a commissioner. I think as a commission, as a body, we made a recommendation to council, not to staff. And we want this recommendation to go directly to council, and we're not adding any other details because we don't have them yet. We're just letting them know that this is what we think would be the best project for the recreation department and for the community in that park, in that site, as per the master plan. And that, everything else needs to come from council back to us. What they tell staff, and staff can get back to us, but we want a direct presentation to council, and then council feedback.
And I think to clarify, that staff's job serving the council is that we provide a complete staff report and recommendation. They expect that.
And that's fine.
So part of that is to say PRC has recommended that 2 courts be built at one time. And the obvious question, there's a fiscal
Yeah.
impact section, is what's the fiscal impact?
And that, yeah.
Fiscal impact is roughly double the price, and the funding is not presently available. And we don't ask council how to do that. We'd have to give a recommendation.
Well, you can give a that would be a staff report and a staff recommendation on our PRC recommendation, which are 2 different things from my perspective. You have a staff report that's going to accompany our recommendation. And so our recommendation will stand as our commission recommendation, and you as staff will make the report that you think is the most thorough and best represents staff's opinion. And that's great, and that's exactly how it's supposed to work. But they don't always coincide. And we don't have to agree with staff, and staff doesn't have to agree with us. We just need to present that in a thorough manner to council for them to react to. So
I guess
this
it
is where
seems
feel
like the white elephant in the room, where do we get the funding? So
That's for council to deal with. That is not for us to deal with. That is not within our purview. We don't do that. But when we have a strong and, opinion from this body about what we want to happen, we need to go to staff. We don't go to staff, we go directly to council. And as staff, you need to give them your best information that you have possible for them to make decisions. But at the end of the day, it is always the council that makes budgetary decisions. If they wanted to, I'm not saying that they will or they do, they could move money from one place to another. They make those decisions all the time, and that is part of what they're elected to do. And so having us try and discuss the money doesn't make sense at this point. Squashing something before we can even get it to council on a staff level, before we get to have the discussion, isn't appropriate.
I think that was Sophocles and I's intention, is that the council already approved the present funding, so for us to go back to them is
You can
unusual.
always go back. A budget is a budget until you change it, and changes happen throughout the entire budgetary year. They do happen on a regular basis.
Right.
It's where you make the choices to do that or not, and that's totally up to council. That's neither a staff or a commission decision.
I think the council did approve in the capital improvement program, the futsal court, right? Was it 2 courts or was it 1?
I think this is a moot discussion, and from my
Yeah.
perspective, I would like to, I don't see any point in discussing it further. I just want to move a recommendation forward, and you will have your staff recommendation attached to it. Council will hear it. We will get feedback from council, and we'll move from there.
I'll leave that up to Sophocles as the liaison to the PRC. He can handle it as he pleases.
Sure, yeah.
And I think also just one
Yeah.
question on the CIP, we have 150,000 currently for the outdoor basketball courts budgeted, correct? And then I think on the multi-sport for Sarasota, the estimate to do the 2 courts without lights was 258. So it was essentially 108,000 for the second court versus 150. with no lighting,
Right,
so not quite double.
okay,
Yeah,
fair enough, yeah.
yeah.
Just want to be clear.
Right,
And that's an estimate, I understand, but
right.
it was, if
It
there was
wouldn't
a
have, it
significant
wouldn't have been
savings,
double the cost.
if we're
but-
talking, if you want to apply the same philosophy that we just got done discussing regarding the restrooms, there is a significant savings to building the 2 courts at once. And I think that that's fair to enlighten council on our research. I mean, that's our
Right.
whole,
Yeah.
our purpose.
Well, that was our discussion with them
We've
anyway.
spent
I
many,
think in a
many
nutshell,
hours.
why our recommendation,
Yeah.
we were aware of the budget and we made a recommendation for 2 courts. And yeah, I think we need council feedback.
But at the
Okay.
same time, if they say no, I mean, we're not going to sacrifice not getting one.
We cross that bridge when we get to it. There's no need to discuss it yet.
Yeah, but, well, there is in one way because of money, but,
No, the money doesn't go away. That's, I mean, it is earmarked for that, so
Mhm.
it's
But
it's
money
not,
is
it's
also
not like it's
time.
gonna
It's
expire June
time.
30th.
time, right?
No, I don't
So-
think it expires.
Well, I
think
mean,
it's
I
carried
don't-
over to the next fiscal year.
It,
This
yeah,
year.
it does get carried over, but in the meantime, I'm not saying there's gonna be a huge cost increase to wait, but costs go up.
We're getting caught in a trap here, though. We're
Sure.
being brought back to discuss money when we shouldn't be discussing money yet, because we're not there yet, because we have made a recommendation to council that council hasn't seen or gotten to weigh in yet. So
Sure.
we're getting ahead of ourselves, in my opinion, and it's a little bit of a trap, because
I agree.
we stop things before they start, because all of a sudden we get told it's cost too much, but we haven't vetted it with the one body that controls the budget. So,
Do we need to schedule that through staff, or do we need to
Yeah, well,
schedule a
we'll-
special meeting, like for a presentation directly with council?
We'll just put together a staff report, based on,
You will
Well,
stop the
well,
police, or
yeah.
Okay.
Well, with
We'll have
the
a
help
discussion with the city
with-
manager how
yeah,
to handle
we'll-
it, right?
with the
like
help
a
of
joint staff report, you're saying?
Mr. Grant, yeah. We'll
But
do
it'll
a
make its
joint
council.
staff report that we can get to council and make a presentation on your behalf. You can be part of that presentation.
Yeah, we'll,
too.
we'll approach the city manager. I don't think that's really a decision that Sophocles or I can make. It's
Mhm.
really, it normally would be something the council asks a commission for
No.
input on, right?
no. Okay, in all my years on the commission can make a recommendation, and it should go directly to council on, whether on a consent or on the agenda. We have a connection to council.
Well-
We don't have to go through staff to get our recommendations to council. Staff should just do that for us, but ultimately, if we want to, as a commission, instruct a recommendation, which we made to council, it needs to go to council. It shouldn't be this complicated.
No, well, it does have to be agendized and
It has to
brought-
be agendized, but it doesn't have to
For
get the
council.
okay of staff to get there. We're really at a bad state when we're under the impression that our recommendations need to get okayed by staff as a commission. We sit as a body that's been appointed by city council to give information back to them about specific areas of influence. Ours is our part of recreation. We've worked on the master plan. We've adopted the master plan. Here's a project. This is not that complicated, and we shouldn't wait until staff decides that it's time for our recommendations to go forward. We very specifically made a recommendation to council, and here it came back to us through staff, like as another end run, like maybe you want to change your mind. And I am offended, and I'm tired, because this should not be that complicated. And I have been here probably far too long. But in this instance.
I will support what your analysis, and further, when I interviewed for this, that was a question during the interview, and it was very specific. What do you believe your role as a commissioner is? And my answer was to provide guidance to council and recommendations to council. They
Sure.
ultimately make the decisions, but we are a direct conduit and a required body for the city, and I think that our service is our information and all of our hard work is not getting to council.
Well, I, with all due respect, I don't think we've been giving you, giving you the runaround. I mean, we've had very open discussions about orientation. That took some time.
But then when we were
That-
done, we made a
but-
recommendation, and where did
But
it
how-
go?
But
Let him speak.
it hasn't
Gosh.
gone forward because we wanted to give you, once again, all the options and just one last go around at this. And now you've made it clear.
To be clear, there were no new options tonight. Nothing about tonight was new.
No.
Thank you.
Right, but I brought it back just for us to reconsider.
But we didn't ask for it to come back. We didn't.
I know,
So-
but the chair
approve
and
the
I,
agenda, yeah.
Well,
the
that's
chair
fine,
and I
but-
had a discussion about it. It wasn't completely like on my, in a vacuum, on my own. I spoke to the chair, we agreed to the agenda, and we put it back on. But there isn't any sort of undermining evil plan to,
I didn't say that there was.
stop the process.
But it is inherently undermining, but I don't think there's any intent, and I'm not accusing anyone. I just think we're a little confused about roles.
Well, I think we should just move on. I think enough has been said, and Mr. Grant knows exactly what is going
We're-
on,
we're
and
all-
we just go from there.
Yeah, we're all looking for the same goal,
Yeah.
to be honest with
Yeah.
you, is to have
Yeah.
one of the elements of the master plan move forward.
At this
And-
point, it's
and-
process-oriented.
Right, so I think though,
Yeah,
I think
that's fine.
we're there.
Yeah, we're good.
We've made a recommendation. City
Do we need to
staff-
make a motion tonight that our prior recommendation move forward as
I don't think so.
previously recommended?
No, I don't think that's a good idea right now.
I think we've been very clear.
But it does sound like we have the ingredients that we want, right? We've made a recommendation, city staff acknowledges it.
I think I
They're
think
going
I
to
got a
process
good
that
picture
and
now.
bring it to council.
Yeah, but if council says no, well, then you just have to accept it, whatever. That's the way it has
we
to
will
be, and then
take
we're not gonna bring it
feedback
again.
To
from
whatever feedback we
council.
get.
Okay, I promise the Sarasota master plan will not be on the next agenda. Can we agree, Chair Firestone, that we won't be on?
Well, I hate to follow up on that, but isn't that an important question? I mean, I don't think this is supposed to go back and forth forever between PRC and the council, right? So,
Well, it hasn't.
If-
Forever, it hasn't gone yet.
but if the council, which already said, here's your approved budget, go do it, and now we're going back to council and asking for more input, fair enough. And so if council says, all right, you got your budget for one, we want you to proceed with that,
We'll react to whatever council sends back to us when it gets here.
aren't we already set on an east-west orientation of one court?
I don't think we need to have that discussion right now. I think that we wait until we get the feedback from council and we react to the real facts, not some conjecture that we're having right now. And I think that that's fair. We're not making any decisions tonight, so.
I think we might get a little heat possibly, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, as a volunteer, I'll take whatever heat I get.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, anything else on that?
I'm good.
All
Thanks.
right, so I think you will bring this up to council, to the city management.
Yes.
Mr. Grant, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mr.
Thanks,
Grant.
Greg.
Thank you so much for coming and for these wonderful renditions.
Okay. Wow, that was exciting.
Oh, Parks and Rec isn't always fun and games.
Yeah.
Most of the time we are.
Did we skip it?
Was that a pun?
I noticed we have someone else in the audience. Any other more public comments? Or
Oh, good.
yeah.
Let's hear it.
Why don't you tell a joke first?
I'm really bad at that. Please feel free to address the council directly when this comes to our agenda. Each one of you. Don't feel inhibited at all. That's your job. Tell us what you're thinking.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. So let's move on to item 8C, the naming policy for city facilities and plaques. So we have a revised draft that Allison had worked on. We had discussed this several months ago last year. And Allison made some revisions based on that. And now we need to discuss, see if it needs more revision or if we want to approve it. So I'll open up the discussion if anyone has feedback on the document. I've got some comments, but I'll wait to hear from other folks. If anyone else has anything.
We did have an application, didn't we, that was the actual application? And I didn't see that. I don't see that attached. I'm just saying
Oh,
on our side.
I see.
We didn't give you the actual application because there is an application, and that's probably something too that you will need to take a look at.
Okay.
But unfortunately,
It seems like this is.
it's
the
not
first
with
step,
this,
though.
is
Right.
what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is definitely the first step is.
Sure. I just want to let you know
Okay.
there
So-
is an application in place that will
Got it.
eventually bring before you as well.
Right, okay. So any comments on this?
My only comment was 5 years didn't really seem like that long. I don't know, coming
Yeah.
from someone who's been here almost 50, it seems like that didn't seem very significant, being a
Yeah,
part
I
of our
agree.
community for 5 years. like-
right.
And the other thing that I was kind of contemplating, I was seeing how this would play out, and having that low of a number, let's just say 5 years, having plaques all over too many, because so many people would qualify. I think that having something named in honor of is I don't know, should be more of a kind of a higher threshold to qualify for it. That's just my
Good
initial
point.
thought.
Are you thinking for both, well, there's one of naming a facility,
And
and
the
then there's
plaque.
plaques and markers. Are you thinking,
That's one
they're
that
both-
even has me
they're
more
both-
nervous.
The plaques and
Right.
markers.
so you're saying for the first point of the 5
I think it's
years,
in both.
it should be, right, but it should be higher on both, you're
I
thinking?
think so.
Okay,
Because that's just my input. I think if we're gonna name a facility or put up a plaque, it's gonna be the Boyd Center has been there for how long? And it's
Sure.
obviously very significant, but somebody coming in, I don't know. That's just my input.
So
That was my
what
first
number
thing.
do you have in mind?
do you have a
I
number?
think 20 is,
25.
somewhere in 2025. How do we honor people?
Yeah.
Well-
And the city level, it's, their contributions, whether, career is 25 years, something like that. I mean, that threshold seems a lot more significant
Sure.
than 5.
Well, I
You might need to make an exception for people who are young, who died young,
Certainly.
if you're trying to do it in
Well,
memoriam of
that
someone.
actually is the next one. It says, or who has made a significant
Right.
impact. So
Right.
you have the option, but I think to deter, people who are doing this for loved one, certainly have an emotional connection to it. And I think that maybe eliminating them by having a certain threshold might discourage that for people who truly don't qualify.
I think there's a broader spectrum that we can vet some of these people with, except for the 5 years. I mean, you can have a mayor that's been here for only a couple of years and then have a significant impact.
And that would be,
Right, so what's the
a
point of even
different-
having the
right.
5 years in the first place?
I think it's
then?
more for the general public looking to name, or put a plaque on a rock for
bench or-
somebody
yeah.
who,
Right.
they came to Ojai, they retired and they were here and they
Or
simply wanted.
Is that what we're gonna be doing though? Is that, I mean,
Well,
is that, do you think that's
that's how
gonna be
I
the
read it.
process?
Well, there's
The,
two.
Yeah,
so yeah, sorry, maybe I should have structured this discussion a little more, but I think kind of on the topic of criteria, the way it's structured now, my concern with this is that it's kind of an or, this or that. So basically, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's been deceased for a year or lived in the valley for 5+ years. They just have to have made a significant contribution to the community. Or they could have lived here and made no significant contribution to the community, but lived here for 5 years. And it just seems like weird criteria to me. And I think,
Both is what you're saying, right? You're saying
or
other than
not
an exception.
necessarily. I mean, I don't know that someone has to be deceased or, like we said, that they have to have been here 5 years. I think also there's a challenge because there's some minimum criteria that we want to state in here, but I don't think that's the
All-inclusive.
all-inclusive, and I think probably for legal reasons, we wouldn't want to try to spell out everything. But maybe the question is, what is the minimum criteria? And maybe this captures it, I don't know.
And Allison formed this draft off of another, just curious, like another city?
it wasn't,
or-
yeah, it wasn't
Okay.
just Allison's doing, yeah.
It was a
This-
compilation
This
of-
came off of mostly from other cities, but one city in particular that we kind of used,
Mirror. Mhm.
mirrored, yeah. So, but this is why we're bringing it
Yeah.
before you to make but there were changes to that.
Right. So I think,
But you're welcome to, give your input.
yeah, maybe let's
that's why it's here
stick
before
to
you.
criteria. So I'll take a step back. We've got three different things that we talk about naming. One is new facilities, one is existing facilities, and the third is memorials, plaques, and markers. So maybe we could just talk about criteria, maybe starting with new facilities, because that's the first thing in the document. And maybe just think kind of in plain English what we think kind of minimum criteria should be, or what we'd want to capture in here.
Well, the most important part, no matter what the minimum criteria, is that it's spelled out that we're not just gonna be putting placards all over.
Randomly.
For everybody that
Yeah.
applies, you
Yeah.
know? So I think that's the most important part. If there's going to be a vetting process for these, shouldn't we lower the criteria and allow everybody to apply? Doesn't necessarily mean everybody's gonna get a placard that wants one, you know?
And who is they, who approves the final?
That is a
that
good
the
question.
City council?
City
It
council,
says
according
city
to this.
council, yeah,
Yeah.
it is council ultimately.
Because this policy isn't just
But
for
it's-
Parks and Recs, this is for all,
It's citywide.
whether it's
Mm-hmm.
historic building or,
Right.
or
Correct.
any type of new facility.
And it's just, we were the commission that was asked to take a stab at this.
I think it would open up a huge can of worms to just open it up for anybody without having some kind of a criteria. I think it's important that we at least have some kind of guidelines for that. I don't think being deceased for 1 year or 5 years or 10 years is not the issue here. It's what the community has benefited from a particular person that has really helped the
Case
town of
by
Ojai.
case. Mhm.
And that would probably, to me, be the most important thing that, we should look into, not,
So would you recommend getting rid of the minimum
I
criteria
would.
in general?
I would.
I would agree with that.
I would agree as
I would
well.
that, definitely.
Yeah.
And anybody can apply based on the applicant's opinion of that individual, and staff would vet it, or staff would automatically move it on to council.
Having said that, I don't think that either minimizing or eliminating a good deal of these minimum criteria is gonna open up the floodgates. And city council's gonna be overwhelmed with people wanting placards.
Well,
Surprised
you
they
never
won't.
know. Sometimes
That may be the case.
It could happen. You
That
don't
may be the
know.
case, but that's why we pay them the big bucks, right?
So regarding the new facilities, there is a statement in kind of AI1A that says, have made a significant contribution to the community in terms of improvement of quality of life. So is that kind of the criteria that
Yeah, I
we're
mean, that's
looking for?
Yeah.
subjective, so I
Yeah,
mean.
it is, very. Yep, that's good.
So you're striking
So just,
the A, and then you're striking the total of 5 years?
Yeah.
And just taking the rest of the text?
So they don't need to be deceased, you're saying,
No,
and B in its entirety?
And so,
Like striking the 5, for
well,
at least 5 years?
right,
just the last part of that sentence,
So-
have made a significant contribution to the
yeah.
community in terms of improvement of quality of life.
Right.
That,
So
that's all you really want in
That's-
1A.
Yeah.
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 That's it. Make it as simple as
Make it,
possible. And some-
somewhat open-ended or
Yeah.
open to interpretation.
Mhm.
right.
Now, having said that, traditionally, when you name a building after somebody, they've been deceased for a year at least. Now, if we eliminate that first portion, and here I am going against exactly what I just said. If we strike out section 1A, or section I, subsection 1A, of the being deceased for 1 year, then we run the risk of people worship to some degree, by
I don't
naming
think so.
facilities.
You know,
Running the risk of
more
what?
and
Say
more
that again?
People worship,
People worship.
naming buildings and facilities after people that are still around.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's happening all the time in Washington DC.
Is it?
As we know, yeah, of course.
Well, they
So,
talk,
I mean,
well, I think that comes on the next about
You
the
know?
guidelines for,
People worship.
for fundraising and, I think, I don't know if it talks about specifically that, like, does the person have to be deceased? I don't know if it talks about that in the second.
Well, let's think about this. All the buildings that are named after somebody in the city of Ojai that I know of are named after persons that have been deceased for some time.
Well, it's defined in 3E. Right?
Let's have a look at 3E.
So that's a memorial.
That's a memorial, right?
But as far as naming a new facility, which is the item we're on,
We jumped way ahead there.
They kind of merge it all together, don't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of redundancy in some of these.
right, so, section 4 is about naming new facilities, that's the one we're on.
Yeah.
A lot of the text is recycled. Section 5 is naming existing facilities, and then section 6 is memorials, plaques, and markers. And we can talk about those separately, I think we should, because we
Maybe
might,
break it
That
up.
makes sense.
you know, and if it turns out we have the same text for all of them, we might want to consolidate the document. But as far as new facilities and criteria, should being deceased be one of the criteria?
I don't need it, but
Again, I'm not a people worshiper, so, I don't know. It's not like we're building, facilities left and
Right,
right around here
right.
either. So it's,
Yeah.
or even have the room for them in the future.
It's just to have a guideline,
I
in the
think
event that just starts happening, like the
Yeah, and-
multi-sport courts.
Do you get a lot of requests at the staff level? Do you have
bet.
people coming in asking to plant a tree or put a plaque on a rock? What is your feel for your,
We do, and the city does, and there's some sort of, there's not a consistent methodology to how that all happens. I'm not sure how that happens, maybe our assistant city manager can
currently on a
explain how.
case-by-case
It is,
basis,
it
anyway.
is, it's on a case-by-case basis, it comes before council, from what I understand, and the council approves or doesn't approve, and that system
kind of an informal
has
system?
some consistency to it, I think, but not
Right. And it
a
sounds.
policy, where it's absolute and there's criteria for it. And that's why cities have policies like they do, so
Right.
they can be
We currently
consistent.
have
and
no
they can
policy,
have it.
correct?
We currently have no policy. The policy is to bring it before council and have council
case
approve
by
it.
case.
Case by
So-
case.
I
is
think
the-
realistically.
Council indicated, though, what they're trying to accomplish, is it because they're getting too many requests that they want to filter them? Or are they wanting just a more standardized, approval process? I mean, do we know what their objective is?
This came to us quite a few
It-
years ago.
yeah.
And there was
Yeah.
something, there was something
To
that
have-
came to council that they were, and I don't remember specifically what it was, that they were working on. And so they came to the conclusion that we really should have a policy for this. This would make it a lot,
Easier.
well, easier, yeah, because you also have because it's not just the policy, it's the procedure in here too. So it gives the steps and how they'll, who will take it on, because it says that in the procedure, which commission or council directly, it's gonna be, pushed out to wherever it needs to be reviewed. So it won't be one body, it doesn't sound like that's
Yeah.
reviewing them, it's gonna go to the appropriate body, and then it'll go to council, based on the procedure. So it was just trying to, instead of people coming in and,
I'd like a plaque.
To have
Yeah.
a more standardized policy,
A
just like
process.
that.
It's
And
certainly
and it
needed.
was based on some sort, like, as Commissioner Ender described, it was a case of how do we get consistent with this? How do we make it?
Do we have
a
any
balanced
historical
process.
data on how many buildings are named, how many plaques we have out there, and any
No.
data whatsoever?
Not
Keep
that
any
I'm,
records of that?
not that I'm aware of.
historical stuff, they're keeping track of theirs.
No,
but-
I'm
but
saying like
beyond
in
that-
general,
Yeah,
like,
not- None that I'm aware of. And that's another thing about it too, is, we probably should have a database like
application
you've
and-
described, an application process where those are all held in a database. And in this, as you read forward in these guidelines, it talks about who's responsible, the responsibility of the maintenance and the upkeep and
Yeah.
all that. That currently doesn't, as far as I know, maybe it does exist, but I don't think it exists on.
It's not codified. It's
Yeah.
not in the, it's not procedurally or
It-
code-driven.
It isn't.
Right, so the request
it's a
to
good
us
idea.
was to take a stab at this, right? And so,
It's needed. The itch has been scratched in the past with the little bricks that you can sandblast your name on and put them in the park. And I don't think that's doing it anymore, so it's definitely needed.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we have a nice structure here. We've kind of identified the things that get named and the fact that we should have some stated criteria for how we select those, and then the procedure, the process for kind of where requests go and who they go through, and then kind of ultimately where they end up. So if we're okay with that structure, I think we should just kind of go through the elements of it,
Yeah.
starting with new facilities, naming criteria. So we're
So-
back to that.
And I think the way that the changes to the criteria work, it gives whoever's reviewing it guidelines, but not specific criteria. I mean, there's some specifics in there, but it's not they're reviewing it,
Right.
and they're using their own system within the structure. Because I think it is hard for each one to predict what's going to be appropriate based on the criteria, so.
Yeah.
I think if you make it very simple,
Mm-hmm.
then you're not gonna have problems. When you start putting in years and this and that, the other thing, then that just brings up a whole another,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So then if you just make it simple, then it's something that they can, just agree with, then, you're half the battle's done.
I think that the part about them being still with us or being deceased, perhaps is that putting a little bit of pressure on the approving body for someone who's still, maybe they're actively participating in the, do you know what I'm saying? To have to
I do.
reject
I do.
an application of someone who, did it on their own behalf because, right? So it does give council a little insulation from potentially offending
Yeah.
somebody who has,
Well, here's,
I don't know, I'm just
So-
trying to
Here's an
think
example
of
of
the
their
flip
dogs
side of
in
it,
front of
right?
your
Like
house.
there's nothing wrong with self-nominating, and I think that puts the council in a little bit of a predicament when someone is still around the community.
so maybe what we add is they can't nominate themselves. Because that alleviates that problem. I'm just thinking, what comes to mind every time I think of this is, if you go to the government center, Johnny Johnston Way, they named a road after him
Right.
at the county, and he's alive, and I think it was a tribute to all that he had done there. So I don't know that there's not a time and a place for that, but maybe it's that you can't nominate yourself. That seems reasonable to me, that if you're trying to get something named after you, someone else should be willing to do it for you.
Oh, I agree.
That's not a high bar.
No.
So maybe we add something like that and worry less about whether they're alive or dead, but that
Yeah.
that someone else is nominating them. I'm not to say that someone can't get someone to nominate them, but
I agree. Absolutely.
Okay.
Do we have a copy of the
So-
county's naming policy? Just curious. You looked at that?
I have not.
For all we know, this is verbatim.
So,
No, it didn't come from.
I don't know.
It didn't come from the city of Ventura.
No.
Or, no.
as-
I don't
as-
remember, actually.
There's
I
a
think it
couple of
was
different cities.
I believe
Where?
Commissioner Intner was on the naming committee way back when.
No, I
How
was
many?
never, I
Oh,
don't
were you
think I was ever
not?
on it, but
With-
we've
with-
reviewed it a
with,
couple of times.
When it was Commissioner Haney? Yeah, maybe not.
You were
I
on
don't
the
know. It's
commission,
been-
possibly.
It's been a while with this
Okay.
naming policy, and it was a compilation of cities, not just one. But
Right.
anyway, but I don't think.
So,
But I can look. I mean,
I just
I
was
guess we
curious.
can all look at. We can all look at any city's naming policies and go online and check it out and see what they've got going.
Yeah, I don't think we should
Little
spend any more
experience, too.
time on that one.
okay, so
Back on.
I invite you to go look around and see what other.
on
cities-
new facilities, sorry, I
Yeah.
do want to
Sorry.
keep the
Bring
discussion
it Go back
going.
to it.
Okay, so on new facilities, the criteria that we've discussed is keeping the quote, have made a significant contribution to the community in terms of improvement of quality of life.
Exactly.
And it sounds like there's interest in, the nomination has to be by someone
Yeah, and
other
that
than
should be
the
important.
person. Does that sound right?
So yeah, maybe that's part of A, 1A,
Yeah,
or AI 1A.
Mhm.
You could add must be nominated by,
so there's just two criteria,
There's just two.
basically. For AI,
Yeah.
there's two criteria.
Yeah.
One is significant contribution, two is nominated by someone else.
Yeah.
Applicants may not self-nominate.
Yeah.
We'll
Is that how you
try
say
to
it?
work on the,
On the word.
Yeah, the wording,
Nominated by a community member
Work on
or
the-
something
we'll
like
work
that.
on the
we're not gonna
language.
wordsmith.
No.
And I
tonight.
think that all of
No.
that works just, I think that same criteria works
Yeah, all the way
for
through.
existing facilities.
Okay,
Well, and.
Anonymous phone call, or I'd like to nominate Mr. Jenkins
I
from.
think the same for plaques and markers. I mean, can't we just be consistent?
okay,
What's the difference?
okay. So we will get there,
Okay.
trust me. But the next, after the criteria,
Like one section at
or
a
I
time.
think part of criteria section on page 2 is guidelines associated with fundraising campaigns. So this is saying that organizations affiliated with the city that want to raise funds for city-sponsored project must receive a recommendation from the Parks and Rec Commission.
I don't think we should get involved with that.
Well, this relates
This is for
directly
parks.
back to parks.
Yeah.
When, for instance, the playground.
Uh-huh.
They did fundraising and they have both the walkway and a lot of the elements are there are plaques on there for the people who helped sponsor them.
And the bricks
Wow.
and stuff, right?
Yeah, and this is just saying that before you do that, you need to come to this body if you're trying to do it for specifically a Parks and Recreation facility.
Oh.
And that would need a recommendation out of this commission to council, and then council would say, okay.
Right, so we are in the new facilities section.
Sorry, yes.
still. So,
And the playground was a new facility, so it fits for this as an example.
so if somebody wanted to name the playground, this
Or
is,
elements of the just the facility itself. Well,
Right.
no, it's both, because they're new elements. Where would that come under if not there?
so that's a question I have. I think that comes later. Kind of what you call those elements.
But it's under the fundraising for a new facility.
Yeah,
That's
so
why it should
there's
be
an issue
consistent.
here,
That's
right?
okay.
Because, I mean,
Well, then I just-
let's
the
think
thing will
about
be
the
under there.
playground,
Okay.
like, if
Yeah.
somebody wanted to name the playground, that's probably one discussion. If somebody wants to raise funds to name, benches in the playground, I think that's another discussion.
But I
It
think
should
if
both
we
be in this
have
document.
consistent criteria for all of the elements, if you're making it clear by repeating the text, because you turn to the section that's applicable, but I think if we establish that criteria, it can carry
Sure.
through the document, and then we don't
That's-
have to.
That's fine, yeah. Yeah, and the criteria might be the same for naming the whole playground in
Yeah.
this example, or naming the benches.
Yeah.
It might not be, it doesn't have to be,
Mhm.
right? If it happens to be the same, we don't have to repeat it.
Right.
But for naming new facilities, let's kind of think through that.
Okay.
And as you're reading it, that's just the name of the entire thing, not any elements of it,
Yeah,
even though they're all new. I'm struggling with
I
that
mean-
because for
Facility
me,
as a
Sure.
whole,
for
you're
me
saying.
organizationally, the fundraising campaign won't be, it'll come under two headings, even though it's one fundraising campaign?
we can structure this document however we want to. I'm trying to guide
I
the
just-
discussion.
Oh, fair enough, I'm just, yeah, I read it differently.
But, yeah, so however you guys want to take this,
Okay.
have at
Well, the
it.
playground is a good example. So you have the playground as a facility, and then within
Right.
the playground, you have, maybe you're gonna add a new slide, or any kind of element. They can all be individually recognized, and then the park or the facility can be
Named. as a whole.
recognized as
Mhm.
well.
Okay.
I mean,
Right, and so you think about the playground, like, we name Libby Park, right? And I guess the playground has the name Libby Playground, maybe. We don't necessarily name the slide, but we do put a plaque
It's
on the
not
slide.
named, it's, yeah.
there's,
on,
yeah.
more of a memorial, an honor plaque, would you call it, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Plaque,
Plaque.
Regardless,
Or brick.
as
right?
per, and markers.
maybe think about all of these things if it's helpful, but some
Okay.
organization wants to raise money and wants to assign names to things that they're funding from this raising of money. What is the process?
Okay.
Yeah.
And that did
And I
happen,
like the
right?
process here.
Right.
I think this works well. I like what they've laid out here.
So, and it says here, they get a recommendation from Parks and Recreation.
Which goes to
Um,
council.
There are some constraints on what can be in the name. And then, So it's a little unclear from this exactly what the process is, right? Because at some point you notify city staff.
Right.
Nothing's final until council approves it. But generally, the idea is either you're requesting this from staff or the commission. Probably staff, right? And they'd come to the commission?
That's, maybe that's where
Yeah.
the application comes in. An
The
application
would
is,
go to staff, and
Right.
staff would bring it to commission on the
Right.
agenda. type.
right. Yeah, there'd be an application process and.
Kind of like the
Outcome.
Libby Bowl application.
It doesn't spell that out, specifically that
I don't
application needs to be completed. Maybe it needs to be written there, I don't know.
No, well, it's under procedures, like, and we just need to,
Yeah, it does say it
like,
procedures,
under
maybe move.
page 3, request provide, staff will review the form and forward it appropriately to the commission or committee for consideration. I mean, so we can copy that same procedure on page 3, item B.
But back to, for 1 second, still on the policy guidelines.
Okay.
Number 3, organizations conducting fundraising campaigns with naming opportunities attached must immediately notify the city staff when naming proposal is under consideration in order to facilitate an administrative review. That's a really weird place to have that, because it doesn't make sense, because you've already gone to the Parks Commission. I think it's redundant, isn't it?
I mean, the organization of this is weird. I agree.
If we're going back to, if we're just doing I mean, you've already kind of done that. I don't understand what the intent is.
Well, so if an organization wants to name something and they're raising funds to do it, there's some initial, I think, review where we say, go ahead, yeah,
Yes.
you can offer that to whoever you're raising funds
Right.
from. Of course, it's pending council's final approval, and then they go and raise funds. And now they say, okay, we've helped sponsor this thing, we want to apply some names to stuff.
I still think it's redundant, because the next one is acceptance of naming proposal.
I think what that's saying, if I read it, how I read it, would be like the Lions Club raising funds for the, buy a brick,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that what it's saying with naming opportunities attached specifically to their fundraising, they're making promises to the public
Right.
type of a thing.
Okay.
I think
Cart
that
before the
that,
horse kind of thing.
yeah, I think that that's what, 3 is about. I
But I-
think the other one is if they're raising funds, it's not,
Affiliated with the city?
it's not I just think that this kind of implies like they're buying something with their, like their fundraising.
Yeah, that's the way I
That's what
interpret
this
it
They're-
as
they're
well.
buying- use the
Exactly.
brick, buy a brick
yeah.
to pave the way to the
Yeah.
new restroom. I
Yeah,
think that's what 3 is referring to,
yeah.
That's where I want my name, right?
right?
So the point is that it should be, that should be inverted. I mean, you don't raise the money, you get the idea and then you bring it to,
But again, this also, we're still in the new facilities section, so I think here we might feel differently about a brick and a campaign to
whole
raise
facility,
money, where people do know what they're donating money and they are gonna get their name on a brick. Whereas a facility,
yeah,
I don't know if we'd want
that's
to
different. Yeah,
offer that
Yeah.
to a group to raise money and then,
yeah. I think once you
have them name
introduce
a facility.
fundraising, it's,
So you're
It's a-
saying take 3 out of the new
Takes a
facilities?
whole different perspective.
do we need it in the
I
new
don't think
facilities
so.
I don't
section?
think so.
I don't think so at all.
So that's the,
Omit 3?
4A, is that 3? It's the II.
I
Mm-hmm.
What would, but that whole section II,
Oh, you think the whole section,
I mean, do we want that in new facilities?
I think you still need the first one.
Yeah, for them to come, if they're gonna raise, if they wanna build a new facility with funds that they're raising, I think they need to have approval of council first.
Because what you're looking
Those are
for
important.
is they're going to reference the city in a city project and say that they're working on that. They need to have had okay already.
And I think you need 2, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yep.
I think that's important, so, I 1 and 2, And then let's read over 4
And
here.
4 makes sense to me, but
So on 2, my concern with that is that it's too specific.
well, those are specifically absolutely not going to happen. Do you want another one that's less specific?
Probably not.
Okay.
It's just that, yeah.
As a city, alcohol,
think-
tobacco, religious, and political are,
This is probably a question for like legal counsel, not
Yeah,
for us.
not
but
for
kind of
us.
How you,
how to word it?
yes.
Yes.
It's a
The
word
wording
doc.
I'm fine with, but the intent I think is important.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a canned answer somewhere that
Yeah.
most cities use.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay.
And this one is, 4 is specific only to Parks and Recreation, and my guess would be because we have the most opportunity for these to come forward. as
And we
far-
were working on it.
And I'm just saying, it doesn't have any
They
other,
can reword
it
it
doesn't
other ways.
specifically name the other commissions.
It does later on somewhere
But is
here,
that
though.
primarily because, of the city parks being city property and most like public places?
I think most of the naming that's been done, like Clough Vista is an example of a project that was fundraised by another organization, and they were, you know, and that got named.
I'm sorry,
The-
so I've got to go.
A question I'd have though is if this is more general and we are talking about new facilities, so certainly a lot of them are clearly going to be Parks and Rec related, but if there's something that's not, who determines that and pushes it off to the right
It puts it to city
commission?
council.
And then they can appropriately,
It says that they can. they
Right,
can
but do
put
we
it up.
decide that? The staff, who decides this is not for Parks and Rec Commission to
I think
decide?
council. But, well, that was my takeaway, but I don't know that it
I would
says
say
that.
city staff, actually. I would say the application is gonna go to staff here, I assume, right? And then they're gonna farm it out to the appropriate
Yeah, they can-
department, that's kind of their
Be the
function,
sorters.
right, right? And
Okay.
then if it ends up in a commission and that commission feels it's not an appropriate venue for that discussion, they can punt it back to staff, and I think that's okay, right?
Or council, either way, yeah.
That's assuming we get clear, defined guidelines here from city staff, right? I mean, if it's not clear to us right now, it's not gonna be clear to them.
Well, here's what my take on this whole thing is, we are making a stab at it. It's going to go to staff. Staff's going to work on it, and it will go to council. Council will have feedback. This isn't the end of this by any means. It's actually just the very beginning. And the council will react to it and make the changes they see fit, which will go back to staff. Staff will work on it. And if it significantly affects us, they'll send it back to us. But if not, it'll be between council and staff after we push it forward. And so as far as, from my perspective, as far as aligning it with what it needs to be for the entire city, I don't feel like that's completely our job. I feel like getting what we're doing so if it reflects us more in this than the whole entire city, I'm okay with that, because I think it's fine for staff and council to make it work for the whole city.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like for this specifically, applications are going to come to staff. In a lot of cases, staff is going to send them to Parks and Recreation Commission because they're Parks and Recreation related. And there's some wording in there that maybe we don't figure out, but there's a, what if it's not Parks and Rec related? Okay. So that's about fundraising campaigns, which is that a naming criteria? Is it kind of an
So
organization?
sorry, Commissioner,
Yeah.
Chair Firestone, did you say you want to eliminate 3? On,
Yeah.
on,
I3.
I,
Yeah,
on
and
page
I think
2.
we're talking about kind of rewording this section II more generally to capture this process that we're talking about. That an organization goes to staff, says they'd like to collect funds, and as part of that, they're gonna be offering a naming opportunity with it. And staff is gonna decide which commission should review that and say, yes, it's okay for you to go and raise
Well,
funds.
right.
No, you can't put it there, Ryan, because that's under criteria, that would be under B, procedure.
Well,
It does
that's my
talk
next
about
question.
that
Yeah.
as
Is
procedure.
this seems
It
like
does-
procedure to
It's
me.
procedure in II, where it should bump down to B.
Right. So, I mean, is there a criteria in naming that
Yeah,
everything we're talking
I
about?
think that the intent of the II is telling people, under your criteria, you need to have some pre-approval if you're gonna be doing fundraising for a new that's a criteria and you meet the criteria and you seek approval before you can move on to B. I think they don't want people out there raising money for something that doesn't have approval in concept.
So, but that, and
think
what we
that's
put
more
in
of a
there is the
procedure.
process for approval.
So you're saying, move all those from II down, move them all under procedure?
Yeah.
I think
And it
so.
could be
Heading up?
fundraising as the heading,
Yeah.
and then all of that under fundraising. Is that what you're thinking?
I think that makes sense.
I think it does too. So then as guidelines go,
So the criteria is still is just what we talked about on the
Yeah.
first
Just those
page.
two.
yeah, just the front
Just
part,
the
okay,
two.
Or
yeah,
just
and
the-
then you move on from there.
Procedure
to procedures.
guidelines, procedural guidelines. Or just
Making that
guidelines.
all one category?
No, because I think
No.
the guidelines are the very broad statement that we had, and then you move into procedure. And one of those procedures will be specific to if you want to fundraise,
Got it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What order those go in, I don't care. But,
Right.
Yeah, you lost me there on,
so basically, all of II is going to compress into something called fundraising, and we're striking item 3 of, okay. Under criteria, A, II is where you get into fundraising guidelines. Instead of having that there, it's gonna bump down to B, and it'll be one of the items there, preferably toward the top, and it'll be all of that information except II3, under the heading of fundraising.
Correct.
okay, so you want to move, I think I followed
So
you
it's
there.
moving to B
But
instead of being
B-
A.
So for,
So.
for I, moving down to B under
To
procedure.
4B,
But,
which is
so
procedure.
but we're not quite sure where.
So, yeah, I mean, in a nutshell,
think
our
so.
criteria are very simple. It's on page 1.
Right.
Yeah.
Made a significant contribution and you haven't nominated yourself. Um, Then we move on to procedure,
Yeah.
right? And we have procedure if you're going to do fundraising.
Mhm.
That's what we've been talking about.
Right.
There's a procedure you need to go through. And then there's also
A timeline,
what-
procedural timeline.
what's currently in the procedure section, which would also stay in the procedure
Yeah.
section.
Okay, I'm just not quite sure where you want,
I have a
At
good
the-
sense
you,
of
do
it.
you, where you want with the-
Yes.
for guidelines
I
to
do.
be placed?
Yes.
Great, perfect.
And this is where it covers the appropriate commissioner committee, as assigned by city council, shall review and make recommendations to the city council on the proposed timeline. And I like that it stays with city council. It can be a consent item. Staff can put it on there as a consent item to go to whatever commission it is, but that consent is read, and if anyone has an issue with it at council, they can pull it and talk about it. But otherwise, staff will make the recommendation as a consent item and it'll move forward. I'm okay with that, but if people want to change it to that it goes directly to staff and staff does it, that's fine too. But again, this is where council will have a, however, whatever we want to move forward is fine with me,
Yeah, I mean, I think council has to approve it.
at some
That's-
point,
Yeah,
so, yeah,
so how they get there,
it's up to them.
I mean, we're going to make a recommendation.
Mhm.
They should deal with it. Does that, I mean,
Works.
we're on the same page? Okay. I was wondering about this, 120 days prior, where it says at least 120 days prior to opening a new city facility, council may direct appropriate commission or committee. Like, what does that
Needs to
mean?
be consistent.
Like, what?
Why is that even there?
Right,
Probably
like,
just as something that staff can have as a tickle reminder to, oh, if they're gonna do that, let's prompt the council to just have that discussion at that timeline.
I think we should strike that part of it because it's handled very specifically in 4. I think that BI is just the timing, at least 120 days prior to opening a new facility.
the way it's worded, it has no meaning. I mean, the council could do this recommendation or direction 200 days before or
Right.
1 day before. If we struck that first clause, the at least 120 days prior to opening a new city facility, then I think we get it. City council may direct the commission or committee to review and make recommendations on naming of city facilities. Of a
Okay,
statement.
that works. So no timing involved.
You're right,
Okay.
yeah. Unless we have a very specific timeline that we want to.
The only thing I think about that is if it's a new facility, it would be a shame if they came the last day. It doesn't matter though, because they could do it, then it goes to an existing facility, so there's another process, so. And that's,
I mean, do we have a problem with it?
What, that they,
In
that
general,
they
do-
don't do it 120 days
Yeah,
before?
I
mean-
agree, I don't think it needs.
Right. I mean, it's gonna take time,
Yeah.
regardless of,
put it this way,
well-
if they have a new facility and they've started less than 120 days, there's a good likelihood it won't get the name.
There you go.
right.
And maybe
'Cause
that's
there's
why
gonna
it's
be
there, just
some
because you
sorta-
can't get through it fast enough. I think it's just put there so that you,
Have a place marker on time.
yeah, but I,
Okay, but beyond that, it sounds
Sorry
like the
about it.
process, the procedure seems right.
Yes.
makes sense to me.
Okay. So that's good. So that's new facilities.
Mhm.
Okay. And then the question is, how much of that is the same for everything else?
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I think if the criteria, if we agree to take the part about being deceased out, we probably should be consistent through, regardless if it's new, existing, memorial.
You,
I
we,
mean, I
we
don't
did
know.
that anyway.
Yeah.
We've had that same consistent language throughout. You should probably, now that you've established these changes, we should probably keep it consistent through the whole document, right? Or is that what you're
Well,
asking?
I just want to
that's a
avoid having a
decision
bunch
for
of
us.
plaques
Yeah.
at the park on trees and rocks.
Right.
For people who are living, who want to just come see their name on a rock. Okay, that's what I
Yes.
want to avoid. I mean, potentially.
Mhm.
I think that there is such a thing as
Too much
too
of a
many
good thing.
memorials.
Yep.
Mhm.
Right. And is that something you want to spell out in this document, or is that something you'd want like the commission
Just-
to?
I'm not sure. That's my fear as I'm reading this. I'm seeing a lot of, rocks and trees and, markers,
Mhm.
especially with the master plan and new opportunities coming up. That's concerning to me.
Yeah, there's not very many opportunities for new,
Right.
but existing, obviously, I think she makes a good point. We need to, curb that impulse, I think.
And I think everything it's clear that we can always consider something on a case-by-case basis, living or deceased. But I just feel strongly about there being an element of deterrent. I don't know how just kind of thinking it out tonight. I'm not sure what that deterrent should be, if it should be a criteria, especially for existing facilities, because we have a lot of them. But I think that is something we need
But
to
then-
put a little bit of thought into.
The nitty-gritty of that is, do we trust city council not to, start handing them out?
Well, the reality is we are doing it now, but without a policy. Not every day, not all the time, but.
I'd like to have some historical data on how, we're being asked to do this policy and really, I'm coming in blindly. I don't know what the existing practices or how many, are we talking hundreds or less than 50?
Well, what about the playground?
Yeah, if we count the bricks in the playground, then.
Well, if you,
Or
you
Libby-
can count
or
that
Libby
as
Bowl.
one,
On the back of the seats,
The
right?
bowl has the seats and as well as the
Wow.
tiles and. For me, the
There's
memorial,
potential.
the
I think
memorial
that
plaques
that's
and
different,
markers.
And I'm not sure why I see it as different. I feel like those aren't, like the, whether it's a plaque on the back of a chair or the bricks, those kind of flow with that type of a,
Well, they supported
environment,
it somehow.
right?
Mhm.
But my fear is going to Sarasota and having a bunch of rocks with plaques. Or just, that they don't blend in with the environment, where, you're walking
Well,
on the brick path.
there's
I
talk
feel like-
about
There is
that in
wording
there.
about that
Or-
specifically, about the
Yeah,
aesthetic.
there's,
Uh-huh.
there's,
Um,
But yours is the bigger idea of why.
just, yeah.
why, so you're getting to the memorials, plaques, and markers specifically, which, it's okay.
Well,
And-
only because
Yeah.
I really want that criteria to be consistent in all the areas. I don't think it should be
Oh,
all over the place.
but I think there's a big difference between naming a building, and, putting
Putting a
people's names
placard.
on stuff
Okay.
on bricks because they
So maybe in that
donated, so-
particular, the placards and markers, we need to have some different wording.
yeah.
But you do make a point about keeping
It has to.
A log
maybe
and a
that's something that
database
needs to
and
be
a-
in here, is that it needs to aesthetically fit, is that?
it is in there.
identified?
It's in there.
Under all of them, or under just new facilities?
Well,
No, specifically for memorials, plaques, and
yeah,
markers.
it doesn't say it on, I don't think on.
It's under
facilities.
design at
Mhm.
page 4 at the bottom. It says, designed
Okay.
to blend with or complement the existing park or facility. And there's more about the
Talks about location, the
location, size, and
size.
writing has to be approved.
Pre-approved material, which could be,
By the designated
Anything.
city staff, which is pretty vague too.
right.
Yeah.
Well, that leaves it
The
open. so-
quality, scale, and character of the memorial should be at a level commensurate with the particular location or setting. So there's some wording, and we can change it, but
And,
Some
maybe,
thought to that.
there isn't a problem that we need to address. Perhaps the problem is,
Yeah.
so
the problem
new,
is,
new and existing facilities seem pretty similar, right?
Yeah.
So those maybe we could lump together
I think
for a
so.
lot of stuff in here.
it should be as short, don't you feel, as condensed as possible?
right, I think the trouble we're getting into now is the what-if aspect.
Yeah.
We always seem to get into that issue.
But I think you could put
Perhaps we should
existing
table
and
it
new
for
together.
Okay.
Okay,
And then I think
I think we can organize it a little.
the only thing different about existing is there's some wording about, being considerate of existing names.
If they've been named for others already, yes.
Right, and, so that's on page 3, under procedure. Care and sensitivity should be given to an existing facility name for historical reasons, et cetera.
sorry, what number is that? Where are you?
BII
Okay,
on page 3.
oh, okay.
Which I think is important.
So we want to keep those kind of specifically for the kind of renaming.
So if it's easier to keep it separate, doesn't
I
matter.
don't think so. I mean, if everything else is the same and it's just that
Mhm.
applies additionally, that's a lot easier
Yeah, I think so.
than repeating everything. But does that sound about right then?
Mhm.
Okay.
Did B, triple I, 3I, is that also in, I don't think that's,
It's not under new facilities because it doesn't
It-
apply to new facilities.
right, but do we want to keep that, or does it
Yeah, we're
not?
going to keep that.
Oh.
So we're going to
Keep the whole-
collapse the new and existing facilities into one
Right,
section, and we're just going to call out
Specific.
specifically for existing facilities, there's this stuff, in addition to everything we talked about for
And
new facilities.
BIII actually is relevant to both, new and existing.
Yeah.
It should be in both.
Mhm.
Okay, so put that to bed,
okay.
onto the,
onto
Yeah,
So, yeah, I think
Plaques.
that's good progress on buildings, on
Mhm.
facilities. So then memorials, plaques, and markers. And here, yeah. What are our criteria?
I'm just throwing this out there, would it be good to do something with this, that they review them once a year or twice a year and not do them all the time? On memorials, plaques, and markers, would that help with the not wanting to do a dozen and tell someone no, because we've already done a dozen this year?
are you suggesting putting a number? Is that what you're saying?
Nope.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Just
you're
say
saying
that again.
We hold the applications until we can
Oh.
review them all at
On
once.
a
Is
yearly
that what you're saying,
basis
on
or a
on an
half-yearly
annual
basis? I think annual seems fair with this
Annual.
kind of thing. And then you see how many you get and you review them based on the quality and the number, and you know that you don't want to do 300 of them.
The only issue I could see with that would be, reviewing in anticipation of an anniversary of something or memorial of a specific date,
But this gets back to your, how easy do you want to make it?
Well, we want to make it obviously as easy as we can on everybody, but at the same time, it's, I
just
don't
would
know.
like there to be
I
a
wouldn't
little
want
bit
to,
of a deterrent is all. That's my only,
Yeah.
you know, I'd like there to be
I
a
hear what
little
you're
bit of criteria and a little bit of, I don't want everybody out there wanting to
Slap names on everything.
right,
apply.
I don't see it being an overwhelming issue for city council that's gonna come up at every meeting. But I could see how it could also become, yeah, I'd be surprised, I'm sure.
Well, so that, it's
So
a thought, I
how-
haven't thought it through.
How do we make that broad but also specific? Does that even make sense?
What, staff, what would you prefer, Soph? I mean, an annual
I-
review of things that are, or do you think, do you prefer to
Case by case,
By case?
kind of.
easier? Just get
Whenever
I-
possible, considerations
I
would be
think it's
brought
it would
to-
be super, it'd be really challenging for someone, are they gonna have to wait a year? Is that what you're, under that proposal? Okay, or you have similar to this, the fee, similar to the fee waiver. Okay, you gotta get your, idea,
Deadline.
you get deadline in by,
Yeah,
two
that's not really fair.
get this in by 2 months before the end of the year, and then you gotta wait an
And then we're
entire
like, we
year.
need more information.
I think a case by case is fair.
Hey,
Case
in
by-
the
or can we-
meantime,
Or
you
can we
know.
be broad and say, at the discretion of, not specifically saying, but we're gonna lump them up and give them to city council in a bunch, rather than bring each one individually, at the discretion
Yeah.
of,
Yeah, because that's a challenge too, to have
'Cause, I
this
mean,
constant
Constant.
yeah, because
flow of
wording is
requests.
similar to that would mean that if it comes only one or two, we can give them as needed, but if we are getting more than that, or,
Influx.
right, influx, or we can bunch them up and wait.
Well,
And
then
do
we
a
can put
quarterly-
a
discretionary
maximum on
factor.
there. We can say in any, it can basically be, I don't know, what is reasonable, 6?
I think there's another element to this, which is, and I'm thinking of Libby Park, which is a park again, and I'm thinking of the water thing. They donated something. Are we differentiating between people donating something and people just wanting to put a name on something? And how are we differentiating those two? Because I think they're very significantly different.
Does it talk about donating in the?
Well, it does
the
in the sense of
guidelines?
fundraising,
Yeah.
but there's a fundraising element to it, and there's a donation element in the facilities existing, well, actually, it's in the existing facilities, but it needs to be both in new and existing, which is that if they've donated, they can get naming rights based on their
Honored,
donation
right.
as part of the consideration, and that makes sense to me.
Did we put a plaque on the Rock Tree Sky donation fountain?
Don't know.
I'm not sure.
But
That's a
these are the
great
kinds of
question.
things that this is what we're supposed to handle, and so as I think about that, they donated something which is different than just wanting to put a marker or a plaque.
I agree.
And I don't know that
Just like
we're,
the
I don't know
playground
that
and
we're
the
pulling
bricks
that
and-
out.
I agree.
And
I
that is,
wholeheartedly
and
agree.
that's even a little different to me, because that was part of the fundraising campaign to do the entirety of the project. And so it was a big project that had little markers. But the water, filling station is a small project, but still is worthy of really worthy of recognition. And so I think that one would definitely come under the plaques and markers,
Yes.
but I'm not sure how we're getting at that in here.
Yeah,
Well, because I think that this policy was written for people who have died. Right?
Well, it's memorialized, but it
that's
has,
what
but
it's-
it
the
references
structure is,
organizations as
so-
well as individuals.
Yeah, and we can reorganize this as we see fit.
Right.
So if we see these very specific cases, maybe we want to have, wording that addresses like,
Donation.
when you donate something, you can put your name on it. And here are the constraints on that, when you
We'll
donate
consider it.
to a fund, yeah.
We
like,
will consider it.
it's right, the commission would consider, like bricks on a path or something for people who donate to a fund. When somebody has passed away and somebody would like a memorial on a tree in the park, like that's a pretty different thing than
Mhm.
these things we're talking about.
And
Or- That comes to the, are we in the business of memorials?
Yeah,
But I don't know that I feel like we're going to solve that tonight. I think that's a bigger question, but
Yeah, we don't have to get through all of this tonight. I mean, we've made good progress on the first two sections, kind of understanding what the issue is.
The counties too. I'm gonna pull
Okay.
that, I think maybe can we table it for next
Yeah.
discussion next time and,
Yeah, it'd be good, I think, at
move
least
forward
kind
the
of
first two?
understanding what memorials, plaques, and markers, like what we mean by this section, so we can all go home and think about kind of what we think criteria should be.
Can we split them into associated with the donation and not associated with the donation? As a start?
Okay,
I agree, I think that's important.
Because not to be awful, but I mean, I think that when they're donating, we understand what the relationship is to the city.
right.
There's a value, and it's helping, it's doing something that might be helpful. On the other hand, the memorials is a lovely service and a nice idea, but I don't understand quite how,
The benefit.
well, yeah, or how we discern who yes, who no.
Do
So-
we have a policy on tree planting and naming trees, like?
Yeah, you may bring up a good point.
Yeah.
If I want to donate a rock or a tree, is that considered a donation?
Well, that's why I said, it's not, just because you donate something doesn't mean you'll get it. It means you have the opportunity to be considered because you are.
Right, but that puts you in that different category as opposed to,
Yeah, I,
You bring in your rock
Right,
versus an
right.
existing
and,
rock.
and I go, no, we already have that rock.
It's pretty late.
Sorry, we're getting down the path, but I
Um,
think somehow, for me, that might be a separating point.
Okay, so this is our homework,
Something
then,
to
is to think about this section 6 and how we would restructure it.
Okay.
And I can work with staff
Pretty broad,
on the facilities, new and existing.
We
on
could send
restructuring
forward
that.
part of the policy that we're ready ahead of time.
I thought it talked about donations and non-donations, but I guess it doesn't.
Well, it does in the land, in the first two.
Yeah, but it doesn't on plaques and.
I think things are messy enough that it'd be good to
Could tighten it up and then,
tighten up
Yeah.
the wording and,
so we are good up until number 6, right?
yeah.
And then from here, we will table it for a new discussion later.
But as Chair Firestone said, as homework, maybe look into other
Yeah, see how
policies, other,
other organizations do this.
yeah, and
Because we
the
probably should have
language we
something
can
here
put in
about
there.
trees. People
What's that?
really like to donate trees.
Think
Yeah.
about which rock you would like to name.
Yeah, well, we need to find a city that's got a lot of parks and a lot of trees and a lot of placards, and see how they do things. I mean, clearly, we've got pretty broad brush here with whatever cities we borrowed some of this stuff
Yeah,
from.
I wish I could, not that it matters, it was a couple, 2, 3 that we tried to not reinvent the wheel on and
Mhm.
combine.
yeah, no, I think it's a good start.
Okay, so that's item 8C. Item 8D, selection of Parks and Recreation Commission Chair and Vice Chair.
All right?
Unfortunately, we don't have Commissioner Comerford
Yeah.
Oh,
here.
We're gonna have to table
Do you want
that.
to table it and do it earlier in the meeting?
So we could do this first thing
Okay.
in February. It's a nice gavel.
Yeah,
It really is.
All right.
We need a bigger gavel, I think, that
No, that's big enough.
undersized. Yes.
Sage, have you held that position before?
Oh, yes, quite a few times.
Curious. Asking for a friend.
Yeah, does anyone want to discuss anything on that item while we have it?
No, I think we should table it, given the hour.
Okay,
I'd like to not discuss that item.
all right. Okay, Recreation Staff Report updates.
We had our first youth basketball league opening season was last Saturday, and as you may or may not know, those games are held at Sarasota Gym and Matilaha Gym, so I encourage you to try to come out and catch a game or two. They really are fun. I spoke with Allison, and she said there were no issues, everything went smoothly.
Sharks and the Jets got along, huh?
Yeah, yeah. We have a new rec specialist in our office, as her name is Shelley Felton. So once again, feel free to stop by the rec office and meet her. She did replace Anita Chisholm, who had gone from after-school program to our front office and then back to the after-school program. And so we welcome Shelley, and we're excited to have her. And Today was actually her first day in the front office, so.
Nice.
And for what it's worth, she's an Ojai resident. Movie night, I always like to mention our movie nights, upcoming. So, January 25th, Friday, January 25th, the movie is Sherlock Gnomes. I think it's not a claymation. I thought it was, but it's not. And those movies are, again, $12 drop-in. Pay $12 at the door. It's from 6 to 9 p.m. Movie starts at 7. It's pizza, popcorn.
Ages 5 and up, right?
Ages 5. Ages 5.
I keep
yeah.
asking like it's gonna
Yes.
change.
No,
You're
it's not gonna
hopeful.
change. Ages 5 to 13. Yes.
Okay.
Next year.
Next year.
And that's it. On.
How was the
I wish I
movie
could give you
How was the
commissioner
Movie
update.
night.
We had 30 in
That's great.
attendance. Not too bad. There's some big swings in numbers.
they like the
We've gone
mats?
from 30,
Oh, yeah, that was the
30
first
to
one with the mats.
60
That was the
or
first one with the
70.
mats, though, right?
What's that?
That was the first night with the mats, the gymnastic mats.
Or this one will be.
maybe. It could have been the
That was-
second, but
November.
yeah, we've had them a little. Yeah, maybe this was the second one.
Nice.
Yeah, they've been great, and there's like I said, big swing can go from 30 to 70. So I don't know how that all works, but that's how it works. Like the real movies. And then Commissioner, still don't know what the progress is on I gave those recommendations to our city manager as far as terms
Okay.
for the youth commissioner.
Mhm.
And so hopefully that will move forward and we can get
The changes.
those
Okay.
those changes, and we can get those two potential candidates to apply and get that moving forward. And we do have an ex-commissioner that is
Reapply.
interested in, so he does need to reapply, and
So he hasn't
see
replied.
how. Well, not to his discredit, only
has an
because we didn't know what
We have an
didn't know what the
opening.
process was, but the process is for him to reapply. So we'll reach out to our ex-commissioner. That actually will go through our records manager,
Mhm.
for our records manager to reach out and give him the details of that process, but
Is there anything we can do to speed up that process?
not
New
really. Yeah, I know. It would be nice to
It's just
have
a
a full
matter of
body
getting that
again.
on the agenda.
I don't know that it has to, you mean
The youth that does it, because it has to go to council.
I don't know
Could
if
be a
it has
consent
to.
item, but-
Yeah, it could be a consent item. I don't know if it goes on as a consent item or if it's just something that goes before is
Can we ask
asked
a
of the
counselor
mayor.
and
Sure,
residents at the moment?
I could ask
Since you're here,
what the
Need
process
bodies.
is.
Yeah, as I understand, you're talking about a replacement commissioner.
Well,
Well-
it was two. First, the youth commissioner, we were interested
Right.
in changing
The wording.
the terms, the age, and then
Right.
the terms.
Right.
Limitations.
So, okay, going to the people on the commission, the nomination of commissioners is wholly the responsibility of the mayor.
Yeah.
So it's
Okay.
totally the mayor's responsibility per code.
Okay.
Is nominating a commissioner. And then the nomination goes to the full council either by consent or non-consent, depending on the mayor's discretion, in terms of approval.
but what we would like to do is change the code. Right now, we can't have anyone who's a freshman or a sophomore
Yeah.
for a youth
So
commissioner, so we,
What I would suggest, go ahead, is somebody write up a text amendment?
we did.
did.
We sent it forward already. We sent it to
Okay,
staff
and
already.
who was that sent to?
and I
Council was the intent.
Okay.
Yes, I
The-
sent it I gave it to the city.
Okay, the deputy city clerk, right?
Yeah, she has.
The deputy
she was
city clerk,
CC.
services council,
Okay,
okay? And ordinance amendments are a primary under retainer responsibility of the city attorney.
Okay,
So my suggestion is that you copy Gail and Matthew,
in that.
along with Mr. McClary.
yeah, I may have done McClary and Gale, but not
Mr. Summers reviews all text amendments.
Okay.
Actually, is the primary responsibility under his retainer. So I would suggest you include him in that loop to help speed things up.
Perfect.
He may have been unbeknownst to me.
Well, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
it
but-
doesn't hurt for
that's
you to
the
put him on the
process.
copy list.
Yes.
And does that
Okay.
have to have 2 readings and all that, or can that go through,
Text amendments have to be introduced,
and then, okay.
and then they have to have the second reading. It can be done. Actually, I'm going to bring up tomorrow night that I want to get into more of a repeated pattern of incidental text amendments on our consent calendars.
On your consent, okay. So
Yeah,
it has to be
both
read
for
and then
first
it-
readings, anybody can pull it if they want, and second readings.
Okay.
I'm going to be pushing for that. In fact, I talked to Councilperson Haney about that the other day. Said, we're always talking about, we need to fix that, we need to fix that, we need to fix that, but it doesn't get followed through. We need to, at the end of tomorrow's night's meeting, we're going to try to talk about that.
Okay, so it'll need to, it could be on the consent calendar, but it needs
It
a
can be.
first and then a second to approve.
Yes,
Okay.
unfortunately, any bylaw, any text amendment, and it's meant to slow councils down so they don't change the law without everybody having a chance to look at it.
Right,
So
but it can be on the consent, the whole
it can be,
Great. Okay.
yes.
It's out there. It's
Okay.
Well-
it's taken one step
Okay.
forward.
But I would just suggest bringing the city attorney in on your communication loop
In the beginning.
at the front end.
Good.
Okay.
And
Thank
then Gail and McClary and James
I think that's very
would be the
helpful.
key people for text amendments.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks for that
Yeah, absolutely.
information.
Okay.
So then, on the other commissioner vacancy,
Yes.
so,
I thought that's what.
Nominations are made by the mayor, by code.
Yeah, I think that's
By
what he
code.
was first
And
referring
he
to.
controls, the mayor controls how the nomination process runs.
okay, so we need to communicate to the mayor that we have,
The mayor makes nominations.
Right.
okay.
Good.
And, yes.
It'd be very appropriate for you as a chair of the commission to contact the mayor about
Sounds good.
making a recommendation for a nomination if you wish to.
Okay.
On the commission seat that's open, I was reading in the regulations, I know there's some requirements for the body, that there's so many in city limits and out of city limits. The particular position that we're filling right now is which,
It can be either.
could be either?
Yeah, in non-cityers, yes. We're okay on
On the
balance,
numbers.
on the number of in-city that we need.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh,
Okay.
well, we can do 11 while he's here. Skip to 11.
Would you like to give a city council liaison report?
You've been so
Since you've stayed all this
patient,
time.
even though.
Really quick, because it's late, but I just
Councilmember
wanted to
Hill.
first apologize for missing the meeting about talking about the application and the visioning associated with the vision, the application for the grants under the big park grant. And I just want to say, I watched you, and I already mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting informally, but I want to formally say that I wished that you could have focused more clearly just on the concepts to help council move towards endorsing a concept and not be so worried about who was going to write the grant and all that kind of thing. That's another thing I'm going to bring up tomorrow night, is we really need to have, I think, resources for when these things come up, in terms of having some kind of a contract or independent contractor or a stable of people in the community that are available for grant writing when these opportunities arise. Because you can't do this. We don't have staff to do it, but we do have people in the community that know how to do this. And I think it's kind of a hole in our processes that we say, oh, let's look at that grant, but then we don't, well, who's going to work on it? And I know you are struggling, trying to, talk about, well, how are we going to get this done if we want to do it? And it's not fair, really. There ought to be somebody that you focus on the concepts and the visioning and turn it over to. You were about to say something, I can tell.
No,
But-
I, that's the big picture it's looking at that application. It's huge.
And there's consultants that
takes
specialize in that kind of
Just doing
thing.
that, and they know how to
And
write
they can,
it.
and
know
they
how
could come to a meeting like this and say, here are your opportunities, and you match that with the visions of the needs to our community. It's not fair, again, for you guys to be able to have to read the legislation to figure out how to do. There are people that specialize in this kind of thing, and we need to figure out how to bring those resources to bear. Because I am one for absolute sure, and I've talked to some of you already about it, and I'm going to repeat it for the record. We need to start thinking broadly. We need to think about how this community was reinvented 100 years ago, and we treasure it so much. Well, we shouldn't stop reinventing. you know, and I'll give you some examples, okay? I am inspired by the things that were done 3-4 generations ago in terms of master plans for Libby Park all the way around here, where Public Works is all the way around here. Stewart Canyon, notice we finally got Kyle Fire in here, cleaning up some of the lower Stewart Canyon area. But we should why, we keep, well, that's too much to bite off. Why? Why can't we look at this underutilized resources of Libby Park that we were visioning 2 or 3 generations ago and revisit that, in terms of could we leverage something like this kind of grants program with the right vision to make use of that? We're starting to think about the community garden now, but we could have, I don't know how many of you have even looked at the old master plans for Libby Park recently. It fires my imagination to read them and to look at them and to think about, frankly, I'd like to see Public Works out of there. If there was any opportunity to get Public Works out of the park, we should get Public Works out of the park. Why, Public Works is in the park because we had nowhere else to put it. Think about what we could achieve for generations to come. Revisiting those master plans and thinking about, almost in terms of acreage, we have more undeveloped acreage for our park right now, our contiguous park area, than we have developed area. Think of what we could achieve. Beyond that, and I'm speaking now to your Valley-wide Parks District Commissioners, the 2 of you, I think that we need, again, think out of the box. If we're talking about a valley-wide district, why wouldn't we want to include the area that is a Sewell Park that's not the golf course? We need space. We need playing fields. I think I've talked to many of you about this before. It's also a place where Public Works could go. Possibly. They've improved the bridge. It can handle the weight now. That's why it wasn't done originally, way back. There was the issue of the weight limit on the bridge. That's done. It's been fixed.
Saying like a storage yard for equipment type of,
The whole thing.
the entire building?
Why not?
Staff?
Why not? Or, I'm just saying, does it belong here? Is this the highest and best use for something that's really part of Libby Park to have a Public Works yard here? If we can find another place to put Public Works? I know Greg's not going to listen to this, but my point I'm trying to make is we took some bold steps forward 100 years ago that we just celebrated. And looking at the next century, let's look at the potential. Especially if we're going to be looking at a Valley-wide Parks District idea. I don't know where you guys are on that thinking, or but I guess the point is, if you're selling something to the population beyond the city of Ojai, a vision that is maybe broad valley-wide, and I can tell you that the county would be more than happy to not have to worry about that anymore. They already leased the golf course to somebody because they didn't want to manage it directly. Would be really happy not to have to manage that anymore. And there's a Public Works yard already over there on the other side of San Antonio Creek. I don't know whether it's practical or not, but it fires my imagination to think about updating and implementing the master plans for Libby Park that included not having Public Works in the park. If you've never read them, I'll try to remember to attach them. I think you all should look at them.
No.
There's a community pool back there somewhere.
Yep.
They're just, it's just,
Yeah. Nice.
the taxpayers paid for visioning generations ago and never went anywhere.
So now,
And why not take another look at it?
now is citywide, the general plan, and much discussion of all of that.
And I'm going to do everything I can to include that in the updated to the general plan.
Okay, good, because
Yes.
Parks is, what is it now? It was 20-some years, 10 years ago.
Their different elements are different dates.
The recreation is quite
The
old.
oldest is the master environmental assessment
Okay.
that dates to 1987, which is then referenced by at least 3 other elements, including conservation and park and rec and open space, and those go into late 90s, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. We have one element which is up to date, the housing element.
So that is something that'll be coming forward, that we should be looking for?
Yes, we have an RFP out for a consultant to update the general plan.
In its entirety, not just one piece or 2 pieces?
Yes, we are debating how to approach this.
Yes.
There are differences of opinion on council about how to approach this. We will have to work that one out.
So as a commission, would it be in our best interest to pull all these plans and be reviewing them ahead of this?
That's up to you guys, but I'd love to see it as one individual council person,
Okay.
because I think a park, to me, it makes a certain amount of sense that Parks and Recreation commissioners ought to have in their toolkit the work that's been done generations ago in terms of not just the Sarzati master plan, which you've done a fabulous job with, but all of our parks resources, including how they might be able to be expanded by long-term lease arrangements with the county.
So-
I'm just saying,
No,
this is why I missed the last meeting, and to me, the combination of visioning and the council providing resources, we could do some really interesting things.
It would be interesting from my perspective, once it gets underway, and I think we can start some of the work on our own. It makes me think of a future agenda item, which is all of our existing plans, which is basically the Sarzoti and Libby. And there's little bits and pieces on some other stuff, but I don't know that anything's been done since that part of the general plan, which was like early 90s, late 80s or
Right.
something like that.
And the Libby Park master
On-
plans go back even further than that.
Right, it would be interesting to get ahead of this from a commission standpoint on cataloging what we have and seeing how it's all captured at this point, because I would bet that it's very willy-nilly and that it's not in a form of how many acres exactly we do have, and then classifying the different parks and looking what we're offering and that
It's a
kind of
lot to ask, but I just wanted to,
well, no, but I think it's something that we could work on. I
You know.
mean, not in some form or another of just starting to gather the data and ask the questions.
Right.
So that when things start to roll, we're not starting
right.
behind.
But everything starts with a vision,
Yeah,
and then that's another thing that people that are awarding grants are looking for. Does the applicant, have a coherent vision that helps you get the money? And we have been relatively successful when we focus ourselves as a community in getting grant support. I mean, I know we haven't concluded the deliberation on it yet, but we ought to pat ourselves on the back. We were successful in getting that ATP grant, which may radically improve the bicycling and walking environment of this community. And that's also part of Parks and Recreation, is bike paths, in my opinion, in my humble opinion.
it has historically been.
So, and one other thing, I know I'm boring you, but one other aspect of this that just recently became very focused for me. And that is that trikes, electric trikes, are allowed on the bike paths along with electric bikes, two-wheel bikes. Having a father who's 90 years old, and some of his friends, they live in town and they seriously love those dedicated bike paths to feel safe getting around when they're too old or feel like they're not responsible anymore for them to be driving big cars. But we are seriously lacking in some of the connections as we age in a population to be able to have, electric alternatives for elderly people, which we're all going to get there. And it's a quality of life issue, not just for young people, but for older people, to be able to have mobility beyond the years when it's safe for them to be driving a 1.5 or 2 ton piece of motorized vehicle. It makes a huge difference to be able to feel like you can get out of your house and you can legally get in a trike that's really not safe to be on the highway with, but to have a network of dedicated bicycle trails where you could achieve that mobility when you're in the, as an elderly person, in terms of quality of life that you could not have otherwise. I mean, I think it's something that it's within our grasp as a community to really vastly improve. That's just a personal comment.
Thank you.
Thanks for what you guys do, you know.
Thanks. Okay, in the interest of time, if we do have commissioner committee reports, let's keep them brief. Does anyone have any commissioner committee updates? No. Okay,
That's easy.
good. So then
Yes. Okay.
future meeting dates and agenda items. Okay, so we definitely need to pick a chair and vice chair at
Next time.
February meeting. We'll bring back the naming policy. I think we can have those facilities sections
Mhm.
cleaned up, and we can talk more about the plaques and memorials and whatnot. Sounds like maybe not in time for February, but looking out a little further, it'd be good to have some guided introduction to the general plan and the Libby master plan, I think, for us. Because it does sound like a good idea, if we're gonna be asked to weigh in on some of that, to
Yeah.
kind of have a sense of what exists and whatnot.
I think it might be useful, well, I don't know how long we
I
want to
can-
wait, but it would be lovely to have our full contingent of commissioners when we do it,
Yeah.
but I don't know how long that's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the fee waivers.
Fee waivers, thank you. So,
And we'll get the information prior, can you email us that?
Yeah, the one that's missing.
Yeah.
Uh,
And if we are gonna invite those, like, performances to grow on, and
Any of the applicants?
I think the one, since we don't have it, I'm sure the Libby Bowl will have a set dollar amount, but, I think that the application, that the, 4th of July, the Ojai Independence Day Committee did was very clear and has
Yeah.
a set dollar amount. And I'd really like to see that on all the, if the application isn't complete, if we could get it completed so we don't have that, if they're not gonna be able to make it, I'd like to have a definitive amount of what they're asking for. And if they, and the way that, when I was talking to Brian, he said, well, it's, we'll probably have 1,000 people, I think was this, that he was asking for, so I think it was $3 a ticket.
Yeah,
So maybe a maximum, like, up to this amount of money based on ticket sales. That's fine, but he doesn't have any of that on there. So if we could
right,
recontact him.
you're saying you want some sort of,
I'd like it to be more clear as to what he's asking the committee for.
okay. Well, he says on $3.
writing.
But the
He,
numbers
doesn't
are-
he say it on there, $3 waive
right.
the $3 fee?
But for how many
Yeah,
tickets?
Correct.
is that?
And when I talked to him, he had the two different, one was a children's event and one is an adult event, and which one is he asking it for? And then what is the anticipated number for that he's asking for? Because it has a group number for the event. And he's asking, I think, for all of it for the children, and then just a portion of it for the adults.
And under a certain ticket price, you don't have to do it.
Right.
Correct.
So
Just
it's also important to know which are triggering, which aren't based on,
some,
The
just some,
children's ones don't, you're right, the children's ones don't have the $3, but he's asking for the facility use fee
for the day,
for the day.
Yeah.
The strike, the setup,
Right,
and both.
which is another day. Which is, it's fair, it would be lovely to have it in writing in a very, like a
little bit more
spreadsheet.
clear, because we're not gonna be able to approve it, I'm not gonna feel comfortable approving guessing what it is
right,
he's
the
asking for.
clear final dollar amount.
And if he needs help, if he needs help from staff, that'll give him the time to
So I'd
talk
like
to
it
them.
be done
Sure.
by the time we meet next time, because I think we really need to get that off and approved
Yeah.
and recommended.
Sure.
And I had an extra one of these.
So-
And invite them to come.
Invite
Each of the
th-
three
each of the
applicants.
3 applicants for our February meeting.
So at a minimum, we need clear applications from 2,
Mhm.
and best would be if they could come in person to the meeting.
Okay.
Good,
Anything else for the February agenda?
I think that'll be.
it's good.
Did you, well, you have 4 items, right? What was the one right before the fee waiver?
I had
Between
mentioned
naming
a
policy.
review of the general plan and Libby master plan,
Okay.
but not for February.
Not for February.
No.
Okay.
But I think kind of identifying somebody maybe within the city that could kind of help start that with us.
Okay,
And then we can
okay.
take materials
that,
home and,
Yeah.
and look at them.
I mean, I can easily send you a copy of the
General and Libby.
Libby master plan.
Right,
I
okay,
mean,
well,
just as a starter, just as a teaser.
Okay,
I'll
okay,
just put that in
okay,
there.
so maybe we don't need someone to guide that, but yeah,
I'll
send
send
those
that
out
to
and
you.
maybe in March or April we can.
And I'm assuming you don't want to put a multi-sport court? Just leaving it on
We
a
will.
I think
playful,
We got what
Well,
we
I-
need.
trying to leave it on a
Although,
playful
if we hear
level.
back from council between now and
We'd
then,
love to
we'd
talk
like to
about
have
it.
their,
Yes.
opinions and guidance and direction on agenda.
All
That'd
right,
be nice.
okay, I'll see what that process is. I'll
How
do
about
my,
this?
I'll do my best to move that
If we hear back
process
from
forward,
council,
okay?
We'd like that to be on the agenda.
Yeah, if we have their feedback, great. If not, when's it going?
I'll do my best to move that process forward.
All right, meeting adjourned.
These are really great, restroom concepts. I really like them. I was really, really impressed.
Okay, well. The number 3?
Mhm. It's one building, correct?
Yes, with all of the different stalls.
So that it's not a Brown Act violation.
I am so cold. Oh,
Okay,
frozen.
we're good.
Frozen.
Thank you.
You don't realize how hard I had to fight for that option. Do you remember?
For 3?
I remember.
This
That
makes
is
the
only
most
on there
sense.
because oh my gosh.
telling you absolutely not,
I know you did.
but I was the understanding that this was actually
an
an indoor
Enclosed.
facility.
You know, and that was, no, okay, that, I